Hello, everyone. Welcome to Developing Palates. I am Aaron Loomis, coming to you from the Ventura Cigar Company studios in California. Along with me, as always, is June Liu. How you doing, June?
Good. Coming from you from the Blank Wall studio.
That's right. Always good. Open for advertising, right?
Yep, that's what I was going to say next.
So I'm excited about tonight. We have a great show with a bunch of our friends from the cigar media. I'll kind of introduce them from alphabetical order of their site name. So William Cooper from Cigar-Coop. How you doing, Will?
Hey, Aaron. Hey, June. Hey, guys.
Yo,
What are you smoking tonight?
The Saga Short Tales, Volume 2.
Okay.
Tales from the land of Kotoy. I think I got that right. I think it was Yep,
close enough.
I'm not going to try to say it, but I'll say Volume 2 of the Short Tale series.
All right. Next up, we have Craig from Cigar. Craig, how you doing, Craig?
Good, guys. How you doing?
Fantastic. We have Eric from Cigar Dojo. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Absolutely. And what are you smoking tonight?
I am smoking the Plasencia Almaforte.
That's nice. And then we have Charlie from Half Wheel. How you doing, Charlie?
I'm cold. I'm still cold.
Are you smoking tonight? I saw you smoking.
am.
What do you
Yeah,
like?
no, otherwise I would not be cold. I have a Black Label Santa Muerte that I'm trying to finish for review tomorrow.
Okay, nice. All right, so the reason we gathered all you guys together tonight was to kind of do a recap of the 2017 cigar year and also talk about the homework we gave you of doing the fantasy cigar shopping spree. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on the list, but kind of just chat about what you guys thought about the exercise, and we'll maybe hit on a couple of the cigars in the list. So I know that Will and Eric have done this last year, so I'm going to start out with Craig and Charlie to kind of get their thoughts. So Craig, what do you think about kind of putting this list together with the kind of criteria we gave? Oh, can't hear you, Craig. Are you muted now?
Oh, there I am. Sorry about that.
There you go.
First, I got to thank Charlie for putting a list together of 2017 releases. That helped me out a lot because there was a lot out there and a lot I didn't think about. A lot I started going to that turned out to be 2016 releases. So I guess I'm a little out of touch. But I went through and went through ones that were favorites of mine over the years. One that I'd enjoy having a box or so of in the humidor to get me through a year. 238's a little shy, but I think I did all right. I got a few on there.
Nice. How about you, Charlie? What do you think about going through this exercise?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, like not therapeutic, but certainly a little bit introspective. It certainly reiterated the idea that, I'm not a typical cigar consumer.
Right.
I don't think any of us are, probably. I mean, we obviously, get free cigars one way or another, just like any other person in cigar media. And then obviously the business pays for a lot of the cigars that I end up smoking. So the cigars that I purchase, it's like a great billboard for, Padron, the cigars that I end up purchasing sort of when I'm out at a shop just smoking recreationally speaking, because I find myself more and more just grabbing a Padron because I know it'll be good and I know it'll be consistent, which is sort of the big thing for me if I'm not trying a cigar to see what it's like. But yeah, it was certainly intriguing, and I sort of cheated a little bit with the Taiwan tattoo needles to help make my list work with some of my more expensive purchases.
Right.
Because everything seems to be $12 or $13 regardless of who's making it and who's selling it.
Yeah. So, Will, kind of what made me think of doing this exercise was kind of the rating system that you were using on your site and over at Stogie Geeks, where you guys were doing the ratings of like fivers and box splits and box buys and all that kind of stuff. I was kind of thinking about it like as a typical cigar consumer, as if you kind of took your guys' ratings and kind of expanded that over the course of their, would that be realistic to be able to be purchasing that for somebody that's got a standard budget? So I wanted to see if that, kind of made sense. So this is kind of your second year doing it. How did you kind of feel about doing it again?
Well, I was pissed off because the budget was less than last year, right? So, and I bet no, I didn't put the $15,000 number in, but I did put a higher number in. I learned right away that doing it this year, because now you put a floor in for how many cigars, I was gonna have to change my smoking habits very, very quickly. and basically look for more budget-friendly stuff. So I aimed this year. I kind of went in with an aim of doing things under $10 as much as possible, splattering in a few other favorites in there.
Right. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I guess I would agree with Charlie in that it sort of makes you think about how much you really would be spending on cigars in a year. And I was really shooting to try to get like 6 or 7 per week. I didn't come close to that, but I guess I should have done what Charlie did and snuck some needles in. I didn't even think of that. That's brilliant.
$3.25.
Yeah, man, I saw that today on your site, Aaron. I was reading everybody's picks, and that was a good way to go with the cheapest one I could throw in there. Well, I know we're gonna get to that, but I mean, I did try to find some cheap ones, but I didn't think to go that route. But yeah, it's tough because you don't realize. I mean, I know how many cigars a week I typically smoke. So initially, I was like, I need to get to that number, but I couldn't even come close to that number. So I guess, like Charlie said, I'm not a typical, cigar consumer.
Right. Now, there was a few cigars that kind of, I guess, were fairly common across the list, and they weren't on everybody's list, but I'll kind of bring them up and get your guys' thoughts on them. The La Aurora 1903 Cameroon seems to be a pretty popular kind of cigar on the lower side of the budget. And I think there was one person that didn't have it on their list, so I think that might have been you, Craig. Oh,
I didn't have it.
Okay.
No, I had it.
You did have it. You did have it. Okay.
I had it on
I just didn't recall who it was that didn't have it on the list, but your guys' general thoughts on that cigar and how it fits in with kind of the price point. I'll just leave it open to whoever wants to jump in.
Under $6.
Yeah.
Under $6
that's a
for
great
Robusto. Yeah, for under a Robusto. I was a little hesitant because I had smoked the Corojo and the Connecticut, and I thought they were okay. And then that Cameroon came out, and it was really good.
Right. And another one was the Undercrown Sungrown. I know that was on Eric's list.
Oh yeah, that was my staple, baby. I threw 50 of those bad boys, and I'm gonna have almost one a week. One a week, except for 2 weeks.
And that would have been on my list. It would have been on my list, but I put the Swamp Thang in there just for a change of pace.
Okay.
Wow.
That works.
Wow. Okay.
Craig, you crazy guy, you.
Yeah, that's me.
And yeah, another cigar that was pretty popular was the La Gloria Cubana Collection Reserva.
That's a great cigar.
Amazing cigar.
That one kind of surprised me. Did that surprise you guys? Like, I wasn't expecting that cigar. You smoke a million of those kind of cigars, but that one, man, everybody in our whole group here were just like, wow, this is really good. I don't know. That was sort of a shocker.
I was talking to someone about that cigar yesterday, and the comment this person made to me was, Ernesto should have kept that cigar for himself.
I think it harkens back to the La Glorias of old, or more so the El Rico Habanos of old, which was a favorite of mine 20 years ago.
Yeah.
See, Eric, I'm old too.
So, Will, you put a couple of high-priced cigars on your list. You had the Davidoff, the Master Selection 2016, Davidoff Nicaragua 6x60.
Yeah,
Bombay Gaia.
There are cigars that I've liked. They're pricey cigars. I recognize I can't smoke those cigars every day, but I wanted to have some in there. I was probably in the minority. The 16 of the Master Selection was my favorite. I've smoked 4 to 6 so far. I haven't smoked the 07 and 08 yet, but the 16 was my favorite in there. The Davidoff Nicaragua 6x60. I do smoke 6x60s. I like 6x60s. I really like that Davidoff Nicaragua blend in the 6x60. I wish I could put more of them on there. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to have a couple throughout the year. Lately, I don't have as much time to smoke a 6x60 either. Gaia Maduro Torpedoes, one I smoke quite a bit. I wish that cigar was just a little more economically priced. I smoked that cigar a lot. Of all the M. Bombay ones, probably that's my favorite.
Yeah. And then, Eric, you had a few as well. You had the Davidoff Late Hour.
Yeah.
Avo Synchro.
Yeah.
And Todos Los Dias.
Yeah, but those aren't, the only one of those is a $20 cigar.
Right.
So and I probably should have went and got like one or two instead of like picking larger numbers of some of those. But like I'm the kind of guy that like I always think of it in like, okay, I need like a certain amount of cigars that are like, like staple cigars, or a certain amount of cigars that are like, okay, I'll celebrate like a few times a year. And so I was trying to think of it like that, but I think I picked maybe too many of each one. I should have spread it out a little bit more.
Right.
And Coop did a good job of
Right.
spreading it out. So did Charlie. Did a good job of spreading out their list better than I did.
Yeah, and Charlie, you had a few high priced ones. You went with Master Selection as well, Late Hour, Exclusivo, cool. You want to spread?
I the only flavor, I think.
Yeah, the only flavor. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's sort of the same story. I think there are, like, I'm not sure the Master Selection is worth $35 compared to the Late Hour at 20 and change, but those are cigars that I think you can't, at least for me, there's not like a $12 Avo that can replace some of those experiences. So that's how I sort of looked at it. And I sort of started my list like that. I wanted to have the Monster on there because I thought the Monster this year was really good. And it was one of the few like big cigars that was on my list in terms of this is a 2+ hour cigar for me. And then Western Asaka and things like that. And then I sort of tried to figure out ways to find $5 cigars that I could, smoke on a Tuesday through Friday basis.
Sure. And then Craig, you had a bit more of a focused list, kind of just high quantities of the cigars you were liking, and then you sprinkle in a couple of celebratory higher priced cigars.
Yeah, maybe I just didn't look at it the right way. It just the way it struck me was to load up on good stuff I like and have a nice year of consistency and pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way to look at the list. I mean, if there's cigars that you enjoy and you want to go back to them frequently, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think this sort of highlights, though, at least for me, like, and I mentioned this earlier, just how different, as someone that reviews cigars, and I'm sure the rest of you can sort of speak to this, like, when you are reviewing cigars, whether it's, for a magazine or whatever it might be, or for our blogs, like, we are not typical consumers. I mean,
Right.
I don't remember what I smoked last week. I don't remember what I reviewed last week. And most of the cigars that I end up smoking are, in fact, for review. It's only a small percentage of them that end up being recreational. And this activity really made me think of, like, all right, like, if I was actually going to try to enjoy and pick cigars based off of what I wanted to do for a year, what would I do? Because my day-to-day smoking experiences are not that at all.
Now, well
Exactly.
said, Charlie. That's the way I kind of looked at it.
Here's a question for you guys. So, us being bloggers and reviewing cigars so much, how much percentage of the actual cigars that you guys reviewed would you actually buy with your own money?
June, can I answer that one? Because Aaron mentioned the old Stogie Geeks rating system, and I found a lot after I left Stogie Geeks. I found a lot of holes with it, particularly because I was trying to use it with my system, and it really didn't work because they were incorporating like a merit rating into that. So I kind of revamped it this year to exactly kind of hit that point where how many of those would I actually buy a box of? And even though it may seem like from a merit standpoint it's worth buying a box, a lot of them I'm not going to buy a box. Maybe I'll buy like one or two of them. So that's kind of how I've gone into this year with a value rating, and I'm discovering there's a lot fewer boxes I'd buy with that mindset this year.
Right. Yeah,
I think
mean,
I'd buy any
ahead,
of the
Kurt.
ones on my list, honestly. Maybe to a fault, I picked just, that much too, I stuck too much to how I'd spend my own money, because this sort of made me think about how I should spend my own money. So I sort of picked all of the ones that I would definitely, and I actually have spent a lot on these particular cigars. So I sort of stuck to that mindset.
Yeah, I definitely would buy what I put on my list, and I've certainly purchased some of them. I just don't. It's tough. I have more cigars than I will probably ever smoke in my life, and a great problem to have, but it means that like I don't think about cigar purchasing decisions as a rational consumer. I think a couple of years I kept track of how many like boxes I bought for myself, and it typically is like 2 to 3 maybe. But most of those are special boxes or boxes that I like. It's a cigar that I absolutely loved and smoked through. And even then, like me smoking through a box is maybe me smoking 18 of them a year. I mean, it's not like if I love a cigar, that's how limited my time is, at least when it comes to smoking stuff personally.
No.
Yeah, the best is like when I buy a box of something special and I don't
Give it
put
away
on
to everyone.
Yeah, I don't put it on the business credit card. I put it on the personal credit card, and it's usually a pretty pricey box. My wife's like, "Why are you buying this? You have all these cigars." Yeah, but these I actually want to enjoy. So,
So June, I think you struggled the most putting this list together. Why is that?
Yeah, this was a pain in the ass of an exercise. So remind me, last year we didn't have the number of cigars limit, right?
the floor.
100 last year.
We didn't have the floor. Okay, so it was hard, man. Like, it was a good exercise. I basically thought after a while, what do I want to smoke within this given year, right? I like range, but I shift more towards not as strong cigars, right? So I like a lot more Connie shades. I certainly enjoy Aganorsa tobacco. And I forget. Yeah, you got to remind me, Aaron. I forget if it was a requirement for us, but we have to choose cigars that we reviewed on the website on our site this year, right? Okay. And that, I think that was the biggest pain point, because if it wasn't, I probably would have just been like, I'm just gonna get boxes of like Padron, El Principe, Natural, and Maduro, like, because I like more smaller cigars and get a little ADD at times. So it was difficult, but it was good. And kind of revisiting my list right now, I kind of hit everything, right? Like smaller cigars, bigger cigars, strong stuff, non-strong stuff, different flavor profiles. And when I think about it in that fashion, that's a lot of enjoyment for the whole year, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but that quantity is bullshit, by the way. Total.
Yeah. So I kind of put the list together, and then I was like, whoa, I've got to bring the amount of dollars down, because it was just a little bit too. So then you had to start with to keep the quantity at the right level, but to keep the price point, you definitely had to focus on some of those lower price cigars to be able to make that happen. So it was a bit of a struggle. And like I said, this year when I did it, last year when I did the survey, I really just asked how much people were spending on cigars for the year. I didn't ask about quantities. So this year I asked about quantities to kind of make it actually a realistic number, because what we did last year was a bit too low in regards to the quantity. So definitely made it tougher to make the numbers work this year. So it was interesting. Any other cigars that you guys want to talk about from your lists, or we'll kind of just jump out of this and get into the 2017 year?
It's a shopping spree list?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my check yet.
Yeah. There you go.
I noticed there was a lot of folks had Fuma and Quarter on there.
Yeah, and I think the Anaconda also made it on there, so it wasn't necessarily that.
Yeah, it was kind of
split.
It was kind of a split with the two. Yeah.
Charlie, did you put one of those on your list?
Yeah, I put Fuma and Corda, I believe, because it's slightly cheaper.
Yeah, it is definitely cheaper than the Anaconda is.
Yeah, the Anaconda is a much better cigar. But
about $4 more though, I think.
It's worth the $4.
Yeah,
absolutely. But no, it's a good cigar. General certainly, hit a home run with that whole series, and I think it speaks volumes to them that they create not only CAO not falling off a cliff like some of the other brands have, but they've got something that they made internally that's turned into sort of this cult classic. And readers of websites like ours that more inclined to buy a cigar product for under $10 and asking where they can buy boxes of it. That's a pretty remarkable thing from where they were, say, 2010, 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just, I think within all of the offerings, I think CAO are the ones that's actually on when secondary market comes up, and people actually throw up there and people buy. So that tells you something when something's hot on secondary market. So
Hey, Charlie, I got a question for you. Where did you find the Rothschild of the Aladino Maduro?
So the Aladino Maduro was shipped to a handful of stores, at least in our region. I don't know nationally how many went out. And it was shipped with those sizes because there was not a Lancero shipped, at least to the stores that we talked to. And when we emailed JRE, it was a very weird conversation with Justo where he was like, we don't really have MSRPs. I was like, well, you sold the cigars, so clearly there is a wholesale price. And he was like, yeah, but it's not finalized yet. And he's like, and the sizes aren't finalized yet. And we were like, all right, but what's the plan? And he was like, here's the plan. And we were like, but the size that we're reviewing isn't on the plan. And he's like, oh yeah, we shipped that out because it's the old man's favorite size, and we're not planning on making it. And I was like, all right, this has been a bizarre conversation.
Yeah, that's what he was, because I was just down at Jerry, and that's what he was saying. They weren't sure what they were doing with the Rothschild. And I smoked it, and I'll tell you, it is a great size. I said, you got to release this if you can. That's why I was wondering about that, because he seemed like he was on the fence about that particular size when I spoke to him.
Well, they told us that they weren't planning on making it for the national launch. Hopefully that changes. I haven't smoked any of the other sizes, and I don't think anyone at Half Wheel has either, although I know from talking to a couple of the retailers, I didn't review the cigar, but I know when I talked to them, they said that they thought the Rothschild was the best size.
I agree. I totally agree.
So
yeah,
we'll see. But that was a great cigar, one of those cigars. When you ask the question of like, what would I actually go out and buy? That absolutely was one of them that I would go out and buy.
I told him that's the size he needs to release. I said that was the best size, and he had only a couple of them lying around his office when I was there.
Yeah, good cigar.
Yeah.
So I'll just hit a couple more kind of lower price cigars. Craig, you had the Fratello Firecracker on the list. That was a pretty good $5 cigar.
Yeah, excellent. I wanted to get something from Fratello on there, and I figured that was one I could load up on.
Yeah,
get a good quantity of them for a low price.
And Eric, you had the Cloud Hopper on the list.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for pretty much anything Kyle has done, and for the price. Now, of course, Aaron, you're like a Nazi on prices, but it's still $6.50 even by your standards. So I was able to squeak in a bunch of those. I could have more than one of those a week on my budget. That was my basically my Tatuaje needles,
Right. And then Charlie, you had the Illusione Rex on your list.
Rex 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually know if it's out, to be quite honest.
Right.
It was at the show.
Cheater.
Well, I had the Fratello Oro Corona, and Aaron was like, no, that was released last year. And I was like, it was released on Thanksgiving.
He did that to me.
We're not using Coop States. We're using 27 the other year.
I was like, really? Because it was perfect. I got it within like 3 cents. Yeah. And I wasn't really trying to get it that close, but it worked, and I really like the cigar. But yeah, Dion claims that he has shipped them. I don't know if that means shipped them from his warehouse in Reno to his retail shop in Reno, but he claims that they are out somewhere. Actually, that's not true. I've seen them. I saw one retailer list them a couple weeks ago, so they are out. It's a good cigar. I smoked it at the show. I haven't smoked any production ones. The original Rex was fantastic. It was based off the Rothschild size. Completely different blend, but that small size, and it was sold at Fumare exclusively, and now there's something with the same name but not really the same blend heading to stores near you at some point.
Right. And you had another cigar on your list that I've heard a lot of good things about, which was the Oliva Gilberto Reserva Corona.
Yeah, I thought it was that's a cigar that they have no shame about. They're going after Romeo Reserva Real and in 1875, which are two of the strongest selling cigars in the market. It's priced like that. It looks like that. It's blended to sort of hit that consumer. It's not super complex, but it's flavorful enough, and $5 and change, or maybe a little less than $6 is probably the better way to describe it. But yeah, good cigar, and I certainly enjoyed smoking it and reviewing it earlier this year, or reviewing a slightly different size, but.
Right.
smoking the blend.
And one other cigar I wanted to ask you about was the Vega Fina Añejo 7 Años Robusto Extra.
Yeah, that's an awesome
does
cigar.
that
Great
Is
cigar.
that really? Yeah, that's really good for the price point then, huh?
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's like a 6.5 by 56 maybe, or 6 by 56. It's a big cigar, and it's $6. Patrick Legreed reviewed the cigar when it was only heading to Spain. He actually, I just saw a notification. He's reduxing the cigar on Half Wheel, I assume on Monday. And it'll be curious to see his thoughts about if that one tastes the same as the one he reviewed earlier this year. Certainly the ones that I smoked, which were the U.S. market ones, were very good. But yeah, that's a $6 cigar, $5.99, and it's not a Robusto or a Petit Robusto.
Yeah, Gina and I will be reviewing that coming up in the next couple weeks, so we're looking forward to that one. Any other cigars you guys wanted to chat about? We'll just move on to the next stuff. All right, so let's hop into the 2017 recap. And just for any of you guys that are watching live, if you want to, you can hop into the full YouTube page, and there's a chat in there. So if you wanted to ask any questions, you throw those up there, and I'll try to fit those in during the show. So let's just hop into the 2017 recap. So I had a couple of items I wanted to bring up and get your guys' thoughts on some things. Any kind of interesting industry items that came up? We'll talk about the good first, and then we'll kind of get into some of the bad stuff. Something that I found that was kind of interesting that popped up towards the end of the year was kind of the reviving of kind of thought that they were completely dead, and then all of a sudden you see them kind of pop up from nowhere, that they kind of starting back out down in the southeast area. And Will, you might be able to talk a little bit more about that as well.
Aaron, you cut out for a second. What was the cigar?
Kind of reviving itself.
Which one?
Cubana still.
Yeah, Cubanicon.
So you have any kind of thoughts on that company kind of reviving itself?
I actually went there about 2 weeks ago, and I sat down with Lawrence and Robert for a while, kind of just seeing where the state of it is. They've kind of been in business, but they do a lot of private label stuff, and they were kind of going forward with their private label stuff while they dealt with all the other stuff that was going on. They've done some repackaging of the lines. They've reblended the Maduro. So they've got it going for a little bit of higher end packaging. But the reblend of the Maduro was a big surprise. I think it's really, really good. They went with a San Andreas wrapper with it now, which they were using Ecuadorian Maduro beforehand. Quite impressive. It sounds like they're going to be making a grassroots effort now to just start reviving Cubanicon line. They got a couple of other projects in the pipeline right now. From what I heard, Soneros obviously is gone. That's going to White Hat. So I mean, they're really kind of just going back to what they had with Cubanicon, and I think it's some of the private label stuff. They're going to probably introduce some of that into market this year.
Right. Eric, anything interesting kind of popped up 2017 for you?
Let's see. I thought, well, obviously one of the big things I think is interesting is, the cigar I'm smoking, Plasencia. I thought it was really cool how they've just been this juggernaut in the sort of behind the scenes for all these years. And then they decided to kind of, sort of make a bigger deal out of their own line, kind of like what hopefully, Terrence is probably planning on doing with Casa Fernandez. But, they really did a nice job of, branding it and marketing it, and just the way they were expensive, but they were good. And I liked the way they looked. They had a great presence at the show. So I'm hoping to see the same thing, with Casa Fernandez, because just like Plasencia, they make all this great stuff behind the scenes, but their own branded stuff kind of gets forgotten. And Terrence is probably just the right guy to do that. So that was another story. Obviously, Terrence, leaving Quesada and then moving over to Casa Fernandez. That was a bit of a shocker, but also good. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I mean, it's one of the companies like you're thinking like a new brand coming out with cigars that kind of have a higher price point, but it's not like it's a new company.
Right.
They have a lot of pedigree in there, so they're able to put out cigars that are good that can kind of earn those price points. So it's not somebody that's just jumping out with an $80 Super Lancero or anything like that.
Right.
Hey, so Craig, how about you? Anything that was kind of surprising to you for 2017?
I thought the trade show was a lot more positive in 2017 than it was in 2016. It just seemed like the vibe was a little more upbeat than the prior year. There were less people afraid of losing their businesses, I guess, and it just seemed more positive from where I sat. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of retailers being acquired by the larger companies. The rumors of maybe Swisher, Drew Estate getting into that area. Don't know where that's going to go, but you hear rumblings. Altadis buying shops all over. What they just bought, was it Tampa Humidor?
Yeah.
Was it? So, yeah, I think that's a big change, of course. And then I think AJ Fernandez really made a big presence this year, making a lot of cigars for surprising people. I was a little surprised to see stuff. Altadis coming out with some AJ Fernandez stuff. It never surprised me that he worked with General, but with Altadis, and it's great because there's finally some cigars in Altadis line that I like to smoke.
Right.
But there hasn't been a whole lot prior to AJ's involvement, and that's about what I had on my head.
Yeah, that was definitely kind of 2016 kind of started a little bit of that, and then 2017 was like just kind of full force with all AJ all the time kind of thing, you know. So it'll be interesting to see what 2018.
Not necessarily a bad thing if they
right.
can keep it up.
Exactly. How about you, Charlie? Any interesting items for you in 2017?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big year, not as necessarily as changing as years have been in prior, but I think General really got their act together. Certainly the roots of that go back to late 2015. But if you had told me going into the trade show that I would have thought that General was in a much stronger position than Altadis, I would have been a little bit surprised. But certainly exiting the trade show, it seemed like General had a very clear plan as to how they were going to execute. They've been doing things prior to the show, but the products are certainly getting better. Their price points are absolutely insane. I mean, when you look at where they're pricing stuff compared to where everyone else is, it's a very, very clear and aggressive strategy. But there's good cigars, and there wasn't always good cigars because the prices have always been competitive with the exception of Macanudo Mao and some Cohiba lines. But now the cigars are really to the point where people, that read our sites, can actually smoke and enjoy them, which was not the case, at least not consistently 2 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. June, how about you? Any kind of interesting topics from 2017 that caught your attention?
Maybe not so much topics, but I just think about, I don't really know what happened in the beginning of the year, but so much more recently. A couple of things come to mind that's more funny than anything. I thought it was pretty unique, or interesting rather. Unicorn, that's $100. I mean, it's aggressive. He has a lot of fanboys, so hopefully that pays off for him. And I think finally Juan spamming the shit out of people made him on some good lists this year.
I guess the marketing works there, I guess.
Yeah, the marketing works.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of maybe things that were interesting that were maybe not so positive. I'll kind of kick it off. I know everybody doesn't want to be negative, but I kind of thought at the end of the year, the Cigar Aficionado list, kind of where it was, I guess it was available to you if you did a little bit of just a little bit of scratching below the surface, you could find out what was on the list before it came out. So I thought that was a bit of a I don't know, a miss on their part, unless that they did that on
before, though. It's not the first time it's happened.
Has that happened before?
It happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a little interesting that was out there, and they took it. They figured it out at some point, and they took it down. But I think the damage was done. People had already gotten the lists out, and everybody kind of knew it was coming. So it wasn't as big of a surprise for everybody. I mean, I think the typical reader who's gonna look at those lists and really pay attention to them, they caught it as it came out. But for those that were interested in really figuring out, they knew where they were at before it was done. So I don't want to pick on anybody. So if anybody has any other interesting topics on the negative side, you can go ahead and just jump in. but go for it.
Okay, Dunhill exiting the premium cigar market last January. Not good. I mean, it's a historic brand. I kind of was wondering if someone was going to pick it up. Doesn't sound like it is. General definitely
They
didn't.
have tried.
Yeah, I heard one try, but Charlie, do you think that maybe someone will still try to grab it? I mean, there's definitely value, I would think, in that portfolio.
I don't think it's so much that there aren't suitors. I think that British American Tobacco, who owns the Dunhill trademark in the tobacco landscape, just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. They've determined it's not worth what little hassle and money it was taking prior to it. And yeah, I'm sure if somebody offered them $50 or $60 million for the rights to Dunhill, they'd take it, but not for what it's reasonably worth.
Yeah.
And I think until FDA passes or we get some more clarity on that, I just think that, between the FDA uncertainty and when you look at the big companies, the companies that have the money to go after it, none of them are really in a position to throw money around recklessly. And so you're not going to see a big offer beyond what BAT already got, and they've made their decision as far as I know.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in on something that wasn't as great this year?
I'll kind of throw another one out there. The Altria acquisition of Nat Sherman, I don't think was really good if you're a premium cigar. Not that the cigars have gone away, but because of the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement, there's some limitations now in terms of what Nat Sherman could do as far as marketing. From what I understand, there's some things going on behind the scenes that hopefully it's going to change. But I mean, pretty much the brand kind of lost all its momentum. It lost its social media push. I think it's definitely lost some momentum. I can tell you at the brick and mortars, at least here, because it was a brand that was moving forward, and now it's not something that you're hearing about anymore. I was kind of talking, I think it was a unique scenario because they acquired Nat Sherman for the cigarettes, not necessarily the cigars, but it did kind of make me wonder, what if this happened to another company,
right?
And they were under that master settlement agreement.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily agree with you entirely, Coop. I think that Nat Sherman really hasn't done anything in the last 2 years. I mean, they've taken the approach of, in the world of 2016, where people were flooding the market with new items, they said, we're not going to do that. We don't believe that's good for the long-term play of the business. They continued that strategy in 2017. Now obviously with Ike leaving, there's some questions about who's going to fill that role and what that looks like. So I'd be curious to know what it would look like had Nat Sherman been introducing new products or revamping packaging or things like that, and doing some things that most other companies are doing, regardless of who owns them. Because I don't think Altria had much, if anything, to do with those decisions.
No, I agree. What I saw, at least in the Carolinas, is a lot of the lines that they were trying to, they'd really made an effort a few years ago to flush a lot of stuff out off the internet, and they were reintroducing like the Metropolitans. They were starting to get some legs, I think, in early to mid 2016, and it seemed like it stalled. So they had a good selection of core brands, and I just wonder if the strategy would have worked better if they weren't constrained by the Master Settlement Agreement.
Yeah, the other part of that is that that's only really a temporary setback for them, even if they don't necessarily figure things out as quickly as you might like them to, because warning label plans and all those things are coming to everybody, and those are much stricter than most of the big MSA requirements.
Yeah. Eric or Craig, any kind of disappointing things for 2017?
I'll certainly echo the Nat Sherman thing. It was a family company forever. Again, speaking to my age, I used to smoke Nat Sherman cigarettes in the early 80s and get their catalogs and whatnot and see the cigars in there. So it's definitely sad to see that institution out of family hands.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some maybe some surprises for the year.
Oh, I have one more negative thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Craig's neck of the woods. CI had a disastrous year.
Oh yeah,
with the implementation of their shipping system. Cigars International is one of the largest singular entities in the cigar business. It is, from what I understand, to be probably the larger of the two pieces between Cigars International and General Cigar Company in terms of profitability. And it had a disaster of a year, in a year where it really should have been all about celebrations for CI. There were some big anniversaries. Obviously, they announced later in 2017 they're coming to my neck of the woods in DFW with 2 new stores, and that'll be fascinating to watch. But when you have to, I mean, there's not many publicly traded companies, but if you are a publicly traded company and one of your divisions screws up so poorly that early in the year you have to change your forecasting from having a growth year to a negative growth year, that is a massive, massive problem. And it's certainly something that most consumers, obviously if you shopped at CI, you certainly felt the effects of it, as it seemingly affected almost every order for a period of time there. But it's not something that necessarily gets talked about a lot on the brick and mortar level, but certainly on the big business side of the cigar industry, that was a huge issue, and it trickled down. It meant that CI was not selling as many cigars, which meant that every manufacturer essentially was having, a slightly reduced year with one of their largest accounts, if not their largest account. And I think that because it's CI and it's not necessarily the most sexy topic to talk about, I'm not sure it necessarily got the coverage that it deserved, because that was a on paper, here is how bad things are. We got to see the numbers in an industry where we rarely ever see them.
Well, it certainly got some attention on the consumer side in the Facebook groups and the forums and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they also had some issues where they had some pricing errors as well that they had to honor, I think, at some point, and then trying to try to get some of the consumers back in regards to some lower priced items to try to, I guess, win some business back and get rid of some inventory and things like that. So yeah, it definitely was a kind of a long drawn out process for them.
Yeah, I mean, the software it's not like glorified-stamps.com. That's a piece of software. It is probably the most essential software to running their business. It handles everything from, orders that are being placed and needing to go out, to purchasing and paying vendors and all sorts of things that were affected by, this 1 or 2 pieces of software and the inability of their vendors to implement it correctly.
Yeah. I think anybody that's gone through an ERP implementation can understand all the issues that kind of come up with that, and how much planning needs to go in ahead of that to make sure that when it's time to go live, that you're actually able to do business correctly, I guess. All right, some surprises for 2017. That could be individual cigars, different brands, things like that. I'll kind of throw out a couple things. When the announcement for the Discovery Pillar from Davidoff coming out in the 6x60 size, I wasn't quite sure how that was going to play out. But I guess from some of you guys even, and just from other people, I've heard that those cigars are pretty good. So I think it kind of worked out for them in the end.
Did they sell though? Is the question.
I guess that is a question.
Yeah, I see. There were it was a limited run. There's a lot. Certainly, I didn't see a lot of online media paying a lot of attention to them. They were good. Like I said, the quality I thought was good on most. I smoked all 4 of them. The Yamaso was the only one I really didn't care for, but the other ones were pretty good actually. But I don't know how well they moved. I don't know if they really tapped into what they were hoping to tap into. That's just, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, in regards to the Calabria as well, I mean, obviously Charlie's a fan, so it did something right with that.
It's a Calabria. I mean, if they sell 25 boxes, it's a success.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then along the lines of like a brand, Matt Booth returning, I don't think it was a surprise to anybody that was going to return, but I think maybe, a bit of a surprise was kind of who he returned with, and the kind of collaboration with Caldwell and AJ Fernandez. So, one with a cigar with Caldwell, in regards to the hit and run, and then the truth, or the T now, sorry. I'm not going to get in trouble for that, but the T with Caldwell and AJ Fernandez. So, what did you guys think about kind of the landing spot for him? And I don't know if you call it a landing spot, but just kind of where he ended up and who he teamed up with to kind of start producing some cigars with.
Sort of seems like a perfect fit, right? I mean, that was actually going to be in
regards to personality.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my thing. Not that it wasn't a surprise necessarily that he came back, but it was a surprise of how fast he came back and where he went. Even though I would say seems like a perfect place for him to land. I'm assuming that, with those guys, they're, just, distributing the stuff, but he is going to have a lot of freedom to do the kind of things that he likes to do. And, he probably really is going to enjoy that freedom to be able to just do wacky stuff.
Right.
As long as it's FDA compliant.
Yeah. That stops everybody right now. So
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, I haven't had a lengthy conversation with Matt about it. It just seems like an odd position to go from one of the biggest companies, a company that's, obviously got the most, I think, prestige in the industry, or one of the two most prestigious companies, and a company with gigantic marketing budgets and the ability to push your product to go to a company that doesn't have it. I mean, I guess Caldwell does have his own factory now, but they're not making it. They're making it at William Ventura next door. But a much smaller company, I don't necessarily know what the benefits are, but I don't know. I'm curious to know if you guys think. I think Caldwell's a particularly interesting case because to me, there's no one that can generate the hype machine quite like Caldwell can. I mean, when All Out Kings was coming out in the beginning of the year, it seemed like that was all anyone wanted to talk about for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep.
Certainly at the trade show, it was the tea. I just sort of wonder with Caldwell and with Boots to an extent, like how can that play long term, with or without FDA? Of this idea of it always just seems like with Caldwell, people are waiting for whatever the next thing is, as opposed to talking about All Out Kings that hasn't even been on the market for a year.
See, what Charlie said, I kind of agree with that. He went from Davidoff, who's handling both his production and his distribution. Caldwell does have a distribution chain for him to do that. My big question is what's going to happen with a lot of the production stuff? Is he going to float around from different factories like Caldwell's done? What is the status of the Room 101 brands, which he technically owns? I think that's a question. Is he going to move that to one of those factories, move some of those brands in? So I think there's a lot of questions still to be answered with that this year that we'll see, I think, surface.
yeah. So Will, any cigars or brands that kind of surprised you this year?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would definitely, the one brand that kind of, I guess, it's an interesting quandary. I've kind of been, we talked about this last week, Aaron, was EP Carrillo with Jose Blanco moving there. I mean, he's hit the road. He's been trying to definitely move that brand forward with a lot of cigars in the portfolio. He's done it through, his blending seminars. It seems to be the mechanism he's used. I can't say how successful that is, been one way or another. I don't have a way to quantify that. It was interesting, though, because I kind of felt Jose being the guy who's had a track record of success with social media, there were very few of those cigars on the end of year list. Even though I know a lot of them were 16s, there was still it didn't seem like that. If they were trying to make a payoff with social media, it didn't seem like that happened. Mm-hmm. How well the cigars are moving in the retail, that's the part I can't answer. But so I'm kind of wondering, well, that didn't go to, I thought like EP Carrillo might become the social media darling in 2017, and that didn't happen.
Right. How about you, Eric? Any cigars or brands that were a surprise to you this year?
Yeah, I'd say Southern Draw, taking the year off, and then he comes back, hits the ground running, and I mean the Jacob's Ladder and both the Rose of Sharon made a lot of end of year lists, and they were both excellent cigars. So let's face it, a year ago at the show, or a year and a half ago at the show, a lot of people probably would have just wrote him off for dead. I mean, he said he was taking the year off, so but sometimes people say things and you have to try to read between the lines, Yeah. But in reality, he really did have a plan, and his plan seemed to really pay off, Yep,
definitely. I mean, he was super busy at the trade show, and like you said, the cigars made a bunch of lists this year. So I think
Aaron, you know what? That goes to show that he's a great example of there's a lot to be said for just being a good guy, just being a good guy.
Yep.
That goes a long way. It really does. Like if those same two cigars had came out from, a couple other folks that I won't mention, they still would have been good cigars and they still might have made some lists, but because he's a good guy, that just adds to it, and people want to include him because he's a good guy. It does help to not be an a-hole.
Yeah, and the fact that he did such a grassroots kind of a traveling roadshow in regards to going all over the country and visiting shops and visiting people and things like that. Like it says a lot when the owner of the brand is making those kind of personal connections. So, how about you, Craig? Any cigars or brands that surprised you this year?
How about Cornelius and Anthony?
Yeah,
coming out with like seven lines post FDA, right? I know they get a lot of money behind it, but it's still kind of ballsy, and it's good stuff.
Yeah,
They actually got 4 of them in before the deadline.
Did they?
Yeah, well, I mean, 4 of them were introduced to the general market last year before the deadline. Maybe 3 technically, if you want to go Meridian, kind of fell into the year after. But the Daddy Mac, the Cornelius, and the Venganza, they got them out in time.
Still knowing the landscape, right?
Yeah.
I think they have a few more coming out this year as well, so there'll be some more new stuff to look out from them. How about you, Charlie? Any cigars or brands that jumped out at you this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about most of them. General, Aladino Maduro, I thought cigar-wise was, they were making good cigars at really good prices. I think the best way I would describe, at least my experiences with Jerry prior to that was a really good cigar regardless of the price. And then obviously Southern Draw, like Eric mentioned, 2 cigars in the top 10 on the consensus is, pretty remarkable. But no, other than that, I think we've sort of hit on all of them.
Okay. How about you, June?
Surprises?
Surprises, yeah. Brands or cigars?
No big surprises. I mean, kind of like after I left, 2 years ago, and I talked about sacrifolium, right? Like, because I have quite the love for Aganorsa, type tobacco. So this past year was Jeremy Jack. I mean, I didn't think that Jeremy Jack, within what we reviewed, how many do we review so far? Like maybe 2 or 3 other cigars?
2 of them, I think.
I mean, I don't think it's like necessarily like cream of the crop, stuff that comes from using Aganorsa tobacco, but it's good. But no big surprises. Oh, I am a bit surprised that I rated. I mean, not that this brand is bad by any means, but I was really surprised when I smoked that Alec Bradley, that Prensado Lost Art, that I rated it within like my top 5, and I liked it that much. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't smoke a lot of Alec Bradleys since I probably got into cigars maybe like 10 years ago. But this shows for me that I should look into some of the like bigger guys and try more of their stuff. So.
Yeah, I'll throw a couple more brands out there. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a huge surprise, but I think just the fact that they've been continuing to roll on is Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust and Foundation. I mean, since they broke ground a couple years back, they've just kind of been steamrolling ahead still. I mean, they come out with new cigars each year, and they've all done very well. And it just seems to be like there's not really anything that can stop them at this point. They did great on the consensus and all the lists that were going on. So it's just like there's just continued success. And I think definitely in regards to Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust, that kind of that social media presence and things like that is a big push. I mean, I don't think Nick does it quite as much or at least I don't see it from him. But I think the quality of the cigars kind of speak for themselves.
Yeah, Aaron, speaking of social media and doing good, the crazy thing that so many people don't get is it isn't just being on social media. It's communicating with people on social media, responding to the things they say. Like so many companies, we see this, over and over and over. Companies have they think they have a big presence on social media, but really they're just posting something for other people to ingest, and then that's it. Steve does a good job of the back and forth, getting people to, feel like he's their friend, like he knows them, and that's the key. If more companies realize, and that's another thing Robert Holt does, right? And that's another thing Juan Cancel does. They make you feel like you're their friend, and that helps. That makes you want to buy their product and try their product.
Yep, definitely agree with that.
Steve's got an edge on that. He's been doing that for 20 years. He, is
right
back in the Usenet days.
Don't date yourself.
He's dated himself
I'm
on
not
I think every topic that we've talked about, so he's just
Yeah, I'm
keep
old.
consistent.
Were you
But I mean,
guys?
it's,
Go ahead,
go
Aaron.
ahead,
I'm
Will.
sorry.
No,
I
go
was
ahead.
saying, were you guys as surprised though as maybe Charlie can quantify the numbers, but Wiseman Maduro was just dominant on the end of year list this year. I mean, it's as dominant a cigar as I've seen in recent years, just across the list. Again, I haven't looked at the specific numbers, how it scored on the consensus, but it seemed like that was just, I didn't expect that level of dominance. Not that it was a bad cigar, it was a very good cigar, but I didn't expect it to dominate the list like it did.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily I'd have to go back and look. We allegedly have an article coming out tomorrow that is supposed to look at the historical aspect of the consensus. We'll see.
We'll keep you up late so it doesn't make it out.
Yeah, it's cold. My fingers are cold. But no, it did well, and it seemingly won it pretty easily as far as the consensus goes. But by the same token, it's it won it by maybe 2 or 3 first place votes, which is a lot when you consider there was only 32 lists amongst 28 publications. But it wasn't like it was on 3/4 of the list. I'd have to go back and see if it managed to win like that certain category. But it doesn't surprise me. Nick's done well. This is the second time he's won the consensus. I think I mentioned on the show yesterday when we were unveiling it, the more remarkable thing to me is that Saka placed 2 cigars on the consensus that he had on last year. And for that to happen is a pretty rare occurrence.
Yeah.
And the fact that he had 1 in Sober Mesa that's now been on the list 3 times, and I know that he's added a couple sizes here and there, but Sober Mesa certainly has not been the focus of Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust at any point in 2017, as far as I could tell. And it still managed to make it on the What's Shiny and New list, or the combined What's Shiny and New list.
Yeah, I think another thing surprised me about Steve Saka was, and June brought up the unicorn a little earlier, is that how polarizing that was with people kind of on social media and various forums. I mean, a lot of people were just taking shots at him because they're like, "Oh, you're spitting in the face of your consumers putting out this $100 cigar, and all your cigars are over $10." And
somebody would pay $100 to have Steve Saka spit in their face.
Yeah, exactly. Every once in a while, I like to dig into a nice, cigar forum fight and just kind of throw down and stuff like that. So, I mean, I said, pretty much these cigars will be gone as soon as they arrive, wherever they arrive. I mean, there's plenty of people that will pick them up. So, at that fact, obviously, there's a big enough audience for them.
And there's
I think
40 of them. I mean,
I mean, he didn't do a SigFed cigar release where they only made 45 of them, but he did make it a small batch. But I think the concept is really cool. Him wanting to kind of use the best processes and the best tobacco and just kind of see what kind of a product he can put out. I mean, regardless of what industry you're in for your day job or whatever it is that you do, like, wouldn't you love to just kind of have the freedom and the resources to be able to use the best of whatever it is to produce the best product that you can, just to see what you can create? Nobody's forcing anybody to, put down a credit card for $100 or anything like that. It's the people that will get it. If you don't want it, you don't have to have it. You don't need to cry about it. It just seems just like crying for the reason of crying. It just didn't make much sense to me.
But it was a brilliant strategy. What is he doing with it? You have to put in the a restocking order to get it.
Yeah.
And he's not charging for it, so he's basically saying to retailers, "Well, you could charge $100 for it."
Right.
But that's letting them make the call.
They can charge. I mean, a retailer can charge $500 for it if they want. There's nothing stopping them from doing
the market
that.
will dictate where that ultimately lies and
Yeah.
what's left. Yeah.
But I mean,
What was
you
funny
know,
was-
go ahead. Go ahead, Craig.
What was funny was when he teased them, he had them fully packaged, right? He had all the packaging done.
Coffins.
And the expensive packaging, right? So it's like, yeah, he's going to sit on these and smoke them himself. If he'd have rolled them for his own use, it would have been in newspaper wrapped matzos, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Oro Blanco was selling for $500, and people bought those up. So I mean, obviously, there's a market for high-end, high-priced cigars. So it's.
But that was going into Davidoff flagship stores.
Yeah, but I'm saying it goes to the audience, right?
Yeah.
So.
And look, when that came out, Jeff Borschwitz told me that of Corona Cigar Company, says without fail, almost to walk into their shop and say, "What's the most expensive cigar?" And prior to the Oro Blanco, the answer was, Gurkha HMR, which obviously I guess still would be after Oro Blanco. But, he said that there's an audience out there. It's certainly not at every shop or most shops, and it's not an everyday occurrence for most shops. But, I think as long as you keep the quantities limited, it works. You sort of take the Ferrari strategy of making it challenging and difficult to get the product, and you can justify those demands. The second that cigar sits on a shelf for longer than 2 weeks, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Gurkha uses the same strategy with HMR. They rarely, from what I understand, actually sell HMR to retailers. It's normally an add-on item for a certain size order, which is a smart thing, because the last thing in the world you want is a retailer complaining about, I have these $50 wholesale cigars, or in the case of HMR, I have a $500 wholesale cigar. I got a box of them sitting here. They haven't moved. That's a very uncomfortable conversation to be having if you're a rep.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny though, because in the bourbon world, if you're a bar, you want to have Pappies or something from the antique collection on your shelf, and you don't necessarily want to sell it all. You want to have it there, sitting there, so people can see it, and maybe every now and then you sell one. But sometimes it's even more valuable to have it predominantly placed in your shop. I don't know if that translates into cigars or not, but I don't see why not. If you have something that really cool, the Viper on the lot, sitting up there for everybody to see, that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it brings people in. Hey, we've got this cigar.
I can see that being the case.
I've been to bars that sell like Weller Antique Collection for $225 a shot. Now, that tells me that they don't want to sell it, They just want to have it sitting behind the bar.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
Hey, I'm not commenting on how smart it was. I'm just saying.
No, because the reality of what if you know what Weller Buffalo Trace Antique Collection Weller is, what secondary value is, what based upon that what per ounce shot should cost, right? Whereas regular Joe that goes in there, they're not going to be like, give me 130 proof weeder, so let me just say that it tastes like gasoline, like.
Now, come on, that's some of the best bourbon you can get, June. What are you talking about?
It's fantastic. I just had some. A couple days ago? It was amazing.
All right, so we'll move over to the dark side again and talk about some disappointing cigars or some disappointing brands. I'll start it off again just to make sure that nobody gets thrown on the bus. Cohiba Blue. I think going into it, I was not clear on what the strategy was with this cigar. My understanding is that the Cohiba brand is supposed to be a luxury brand, and when you decide that you need to build the and I don't know if anybody else is going to know this. I know Craig will know this, but if you're going to build the Cadillac Cimarron so that people can get an entry level Cadillac, then I'm not sure what kind of vision you're trying to portray out to the market. So I didn't like the concept as a whole. Smoking the cigar, I didn't like the concept as a cigar. So that was a huge disappointment for me. I don't understand why you need a sub $10 and then that's MSRP was like $9.99 for the Robusto or whatever it was. And then once you actually go to buy it and it's already discounted below that, probably down I think $6 or $7. I don't know what that means for the Cohiba brand, but I'm hoping now that Sean Williams is in play that he might be able to get his hands in there a little bit and kind of revamp what Cohiba means. But we'll see what that's like. So I'll open up to you guys. Any cigars or brands that were a bit of a disappointment this year?
Oh, wait, Aaron, just to stay in on the Cohiba thing for a second.
Sure.
Speaking of Sean Williams, I really haven't seen much of Sean Williams.
Yeah, I mean he's doing events and things like that at shops. I kind of see him on on Facebook and stuff like that doing events, but nothing like that's super public. I guess I would say. Yeah, I would agree with you in regards to that.
Yeah, he kind of stole my thunder with the blue, I guess. Sorry, Charlie.
Good.
The blue was a miss. Bringing on. Hopefully they overcome that because I didn't think the blue just certainly didn't do anything for me, and like Aaron said, Cadillac Cimarron. Good one.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, he seems to be doing a lot of non-cigar events, like a lot of food and wine type events. I know he was in the Hamptons with a Cohiba table. I don't understand the strategy of Cohiba Blue. I tried to have a long conversation with Regis about why they did it, and I still don't understand it. But I don't know. By the same token, like everything else they've tried with Cohiba hasn't worked. So
Right.
why not?
Yeah, they just run. I think just running off the name that's pretty much the strategy, right? Just
I think that's the strategy with Cohiba.
Yeah.
Until it's wait until the embargo, and hopefully that lawsuit goes their way.
right.
I mean, they've tried everything else. They tried fancy packaging. You want to talk about like bizarre Cohiba decisions from General in 2017. They had those $500 accessories at the trade show.
Right.
Like, what was that about? I mean, they were pretty, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen them in a single shop. I don't even know if they actually came out. And furthermore, I just can't imagine somebody walking into a shop and saying, I'm going to throw down $500 for something, and it's going to be a non-DuPont, non-LA Blue product. That just seems bizarre to me.
Right. Any guys have any other disappointments?
I'd say, what's weird is, M. Bombay. Like, the guy makes really good cigars. I don't think I've ever had an M. Bombay that I didn't like. But for some reason, he just doesn't seem to get the traction maybe he deserves. And maybe that's marketing. I don't know. But, he was right next to Romacraft at the show.
Mm-hmm.
And Romacraft was just hustling, bustling. It was, it's practically a rave in there, And then you stumble out of there into, Mel's booth, and it was, practically a ghost town. I'm surprised that that's just on quality alone that hasn't gotten maybe more traction. And this year seemed maybe the worst of all. Like maybe, 2016, he sort of seemed like he was sort of gaining momentum. And then I don't know what happened. But that's sort of a disappointment only because I think he deserves better. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if the fact that he typically releases his cigars very early in the year, I don't know if that plays into maybe some of the social media kind of dropping off, especially when the lists come out, that, if people are more focused on stuff that was, mid-year trade show and then later that he just doesn't he's not in the forefront of people's minds with some of the, January, February releases.
It could be.
I mean, the price points are tough, and the lists are one thing, but more importantly, I think on the sales side, price points are tough, and I don't know how much he's getting out and selling those cigars, and I don't know if there's anyone out really doing that. I mean, you got to hand sell a $14 cigar from Costa Rica that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the guy of Maduro I thought was fantastic, both of them, but on the sales side, I think you gotta have a bit more presence if that's the type of market you're going to be putting yourself into.
Mm.
Yeah, those are all good points.
What about I forget, is it Berger Argenti?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, the only reason I remember them is because what is it? How many years ago was it that they originally released that? Is it called Intubar?
Yeah.
2010 or 11, I think.
5 or 6.
And Tubar was 2009, maybe. It was before 2010, I think.
I remember that from back in the day, and I was thinking, hey, this is a really unique shaped cigar, and I thought it tasted pretty darn good. So when I saw them this past year, I was like, oh, that's interesting. They're bringing it back, but I haven't heard anything other than even when we reviewed ours, Aaron, we didn't hear anything from the brand owner. I don't really see anything for sale. They were at IPCPR. I don't know. It's unique in the sense that it's brought back from back in the days, right? But not much talked about.
Yeah.
So,
how about you, Will? Any disappointments?
Definitely, I think La Polina seemed like it was a down year.
Definitely.
They've changed.
Here we go.
They're not the company they were 5 years ago. They're obviously they've changed the strategy. I'm just not sure it's caught on. And I'm not indicting the cigars one way or another. It's just it doesn't seem like it's caught them. They've gone to more of a mass marketing model. It seems like, for sure. This isn't the company making Goldies and Mr. Sam's as much as now they're making the number series. They've expanded the classic. I think there's questions. I think Black Label and Red Label are gone from what I'm hearing. So I don't know. I don't know if it's worked per se for them right now to take that step that they were looking to take. They seem like they had a slower trade show. I don't want to say they were empty, but they definitely seem slower. So I'm kind of curious to see what their strategy is for 18 right now.
Yeah, they definitely brought in a bunch of reps from other companies and things like that. So, not having kind of retail connections, knowing what the sales numbers look like. They could be selling a ton with the sales force, but you just don't hear much about the cigars themselves.
You can't make Goldie's not going to make your company is what I'm saying.
Right.
They only can roll a limited amount of those. So I get what they're trying to do. But yeah, they definitely seem like they just seem like they didn't take that step this year.
Yeah, that was a big surprise. Every year, one of the things I do with the consensus is always sort of pay attention to what's the major company that has no votes or nominations, whatever you want to call them, on the consensus. And La Polina had a singular one that came in pretty late.
And they had a ton of new releases this year.
From a YouTube channel. Yeah, that was what was surprising. I mean, they had at least 4 new lines because they revamped a couple of the existing ones.
Yep.
And then the number series, and it up until the very end was about to be a 0, which was certainly surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think what they've done with Illuminations caught on sort of being more of an accessible, Goldie Light or whatever you want. I don't think that's caught on either. So I mean, it's kind of like I wax poetic about the days of 2000, the old Family series and the original Goldies. It's the Goldies are still really good cigars.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but yeah, it's not the same anymore.
I think them and EPC have a similar issue, which is those are existing companies that have been around for a handful of years. There's certainly notoriety at sort of every level, but the portfolios are massive. And so it's tough to figure out what they're focusing on. And I think a lot of retailers, have been burnt before bringing in, whatever the newest and the latest was. And for whatever reason, it didn't work, or there wasn't, enough push, to keep the turns going. And then you sort of get to a point where, both those companies have probably close to 8 or 9 lines.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, way too much, even with national sales forces and things like that, just, given where they are in the market. And I call this sort of the Tarano problem, the pre-General Tarano of, all right, we've been around, people know who we are, but we don't really seemingly have, some core, sellers that constantly turn. And we have this big portfolio with a whole bunch of lines that do okay. And now we have to sit there and figure out which ones we're going to discontinue would be the logical step. But it's like, all right, we get rid of this line. Well, that's, doing $250,000 a year. Do we really want to just throw away $250,000 worth of sales? And you start applying that logic to half your portfolio, and then you end up, I think, in a scenario where those two are, where it's just too much, I think, at the moment.
Right. So, Craig, anything other than the blue that you had that you thought was a disappointment for 2017?
That was the one on my list, and I couldn't think of anything else.
Okay.
I'm sure there were some, but
so how about you, Charlie? How do you chart any other disappointments?
Yeah, we've covered a few of them. In terms of cigars performance-wise, I smoked a handful of Edición Regionales that came out in 2017. Of course, most of them were not 2017 release program releases, but there were a lot of them that were awful. And that's not necessarily been the case with Habanos, at least in my experience the last 3 or 4 years, but there were some of them that were just terrible. And, Habanos makes a lot of cigars, and when they want to, I think they can make the best cigar in the world, but most days of the week they don't.
That's interesting. I haven't bought Habanos in probably, I haven't bought a regional or edition limitada in probably 4 or 5 years. I don't think they're worth the price overall, because those are the ones that, comes out of our own pockets. I remember I bought 2 boxes of Habanos this year. Regular production, which is typically consistently pretty good, like the Boulevard Royal Corona and the Boulevard Bellicoso Finos, right? Typically pretty good shot at, you're going to get a pretty good box. But man, they changed it. It tastes way spicier. It wasn't young in the sense that it was, raw and ammonia, metallic kind of a raw, but it just tasted, it tasted off. It didn't taste much like finesse to me at all, which I associate with a lot of the good Habanos anyways. So something's going on over there based upon my taste buds anyways, right?
Yeah, well, they have a wrapper issue. I mean, that's
right.
that's well documented. They had consecutively poor crops, not just back-to-back crops. They had a catastrophic crop in between there. Those issues were eventually going to see themselves out, and but my issues with the Edición Regionales were sort of other ends of plugged cigars not burning, not necessarily things that I would associate with blend changes or things like that.
Well, all bad, both bad.
Yeah.
Any other disappointments from you guys?
To me, I don't know. My father seems to really, last year, I just haven't really had that home run from them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going back a few years. It just seemed like it was what came out of my father. Not bad cigars they came out with, but not that home run that I've seen in a while.
Yeah. I know that, Charlie, you guys had the Tatuaje Reservas on your guys' list, I believe, and you had a fair number of Tatuajes on your list this year. So
We did.
I've kind of felt like that Tatuaje had been kind of maybe fallen off the last couple of years, and I think similar kind of on my father's side. But you guys apparently have a different view on that, from at least for this year.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the quality of the cigars, I think that the nature of a top 25 list, for particularly one where we don't make any qualms about putting multiple cigars from a specific manufacturer on it, Tatuaje has a good shot of doing what they did this year. Certainly, the Reserva broadleaf collection is not something that we found to be enjoyable more often than not.
Right.
The J21 made it, but I mean, there were some low scores for pretty much everything else, and particularly low scores considering where we normally evaluate peat cigars at. But I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, is that broadleaf Reserva that you guys reviewed out of? Is it from the same box that you guys got? Just
Yeah,
curious.
everything was out of the same box.
Okay.
And a lot of them were not great.
Yeah.
Most of them were not particularly great.
Yeah, actually, one of the worst cigars I had all year was the Michael. I thought it was a huge disappointment.
Mm.
And I love the Michael.
Well, I don't know. Just did not do it for me for some reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you in the Southeast, we've had problems. Just Tatuaje slowed down in the Southeast. I don't think it's because of product, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think they just had.
You guys have a new rep down there, right?
Yeah, we have a new rep, and he's I think starting to really turn it around. But there were other areas of the Southeast covered by other. It wasn't just the Carolinas either. So, but in general, yeah, I think hopefully they can get some more momentum. I mean, we don't seem like we have those Tatuaje shops anymore like we used to. Like you go to a shop and they'd have Tatuaje, they have all this great Tatuaje. Now it just seems like it's cherry picked everywhere, which is unfortunate. So hopefully they can get that turned around this year.
On the flip side, we love the Negociant. It was awesome. I love that cigar.
That was a good cigar.
Yeah.
All right, any other disappointments, or we'll move on to some trends. All right, let's go ahead and move on.
Those Dojo cigars were terrible.
I tasted no stout.
I
didn't taste it.
I'm kidding.
They were a little better than the half wheel cigars.
Non-existent. Flawless.
By default, I guess, then, huh?
No issues whatsoever.
So let's talk about some trends from 2017, and this may be a trend from previous years as well, but a lot of Connecticut shade cigars this year, kind of continuing on, whether it was Ecuadorian or U.S. Connecticut shade, but a lot of, it seemed to be a lot of those, and I think what people consider the traditional Connecticut is kind of, I think you mentioned this the other day on the consensus, Charlie, is that mild Connecticut has kind of gone away. It's become a little bit more kind of that medium strength level or just below that, and there's a lot of people that are still trying to go for like the full strength side of the Connecticut's as well to try to make something a little bit different. But there seemed to be a fair number of those this year, and I think a lot of the Connecticut's did pretty well actually.
Yeah, the Dojo Deluxe is amazing. That's what I'm smoking right now. Take that, Charlie. Take that, Charlie.
So any thoughts on the Connecticut side of things, or do you think that's going to continue on, or how do you think they did this year?
I didn't see this big Connecticut push this year like everyone. It seemed like it was normal.
Okay.
percentage wise. That was just my perception of it. I know a lot of people have said that.
I'm with Will.
Yeah. I mean, there's some that did well, like the Rosa Sharon, the Themis, some cigars like that, the Dojo Deluxe. So some of those cigars that did pretty well. So I think at least maybe some higher profile good Connecticut's this year.
Yeah, Themis was great.
Highclere
But
Castle.
they were small. They were small distribution though. Is it
Right.
kind of how I'm looking at? That's why I kind of look like if you want to look at Macanudo White was a big push with a Connecticut this year.
Yeah, and that didn't.
That
That wasn't a very good cigar. So.
But I'm just saying those other ones. I mean, you could say maybe if you want to make an argument, okay, it was kind of a trendy thing and the boutique thing to do. I can buy that.
Right.
I'm just not sure it grabbed the market like. That was just my opinion. I don't know if it necessarily took hold of the market. And like I remember, going back maybe 2011 was a huge year for Connecticut with a lot of the bigger companies.
Yeah, when you look at the big companies, I don't think Altadas did anything. General obviously had the Macanudo. Davidoff went the complete opposite end. They did 702, where they took lines that normally have Connecticut and put something else on it.
Yep.
Puente didn't release any new cigars. Padron apparently has decided Damaso was enough.
They learned their lesson.
Right. Tour State, I mean, they had Underground Shade. So,
Not this year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They didn't really add,
Yeah.
they have it already. They didn't really need to add anything
Yeah.
with that.
And then another trend was we talked about earlier was AJ Fernandez kind of just being everywhere, and I think that's probably going to be a trend that we see moving forward as well.
It was what I thought the trend was with AJ is these iconic brands were now going to his factory.
Right.
So Monte Cristo. Now he's taken over Ramon Ionis. There was Romeo Julieta that went out. So I kind of looked at the Hoyo. They came out with another Hoyo this year. So these big brands, like these brands that are known to the mainstream, not necessarily the cigar geek boutique guys, were now going to AJ, and I think that was a big story in itself.
Right.
Yeah, on the retail end, unlike what AJ's done in the past with almost every other one of his clients, he's now got cigars in retail humidors that he's not selling that say AJ Fernandez on them. It's not like most people that pick up a Nomad are going to know which factory it came from,
right?
Or any of the other ones. Whereas now he's getting his name put out, and this is something that I think is curious. I wrote about it before the show. When you look at the amount of people that he's making cigars for, you sort of wonder what's happening with AJ, the company, the one that sells New World and those cigars, because it seemed like for them, it was, particularly prior to the trade show, the year leading up to it, it was almost dead silent from the prior trade show to IPCBR 2017. And in that same period of time, you had national releases from General and Altadas, you had private labels going out to JR. And I certainly, if you're an AJ Fernandez rep, there's got to be some days where you sit there and bang your head against the table because you go, I walk into a shop and the retailer goes, well, I don't really need any AJs from you because Colonel and Altadas are filling my shelves with AJ products. And you're
right.
Like, great.
What the AJ rep supporting an event by Altadas, which I've seen.
Is that happening?
Oh yeah, I've seen that happen. Well, he's got to work in some capacity at that event, I should say. He's not doing the sales.
Does Altadas not have enough reps?
Well, I've seen the AJ reps kind of hosting AJ, so to speak, when he's in town and going to those events. So yeah.
Oh, that I can understand. Yeah, like driving around makes sense. Yeah, I mean,
right. But it's still taking him it's still taking him away from visiting.
Yeah, it's all for the good of AJ. But if you're a rep, making commission sales, like that's got to be unbelievably frustrating. And I'm sort of curious to see what the long-term future is, because at some point you wonder, like, all right, like does AJ just basically turn into what Plasencia was and just make cigars for other people? Right. I imagine that would involve a lot more headaches, but it may not be the best thing for the bottom line.
Yeah. So any other trends that you guys saw in 2017?
Definitely a lot of packaging changes. Yeah. It seemed like there's obvious reasons for that with warning labels coming.
Right.
Obviously with the court decision from the year before, people took advantage of that to get their packaging changes in. So it seemed like there were quite a bit of packaging changes this year.
Yeah.
Oh, this is something that I can't quantify, but it kind of seems like it anyways. In terms of like community, like cigar community, I feel like more and more folks are kind of going to like Facebook groups for cigars, and less of the like traditional forums that you see out there. Yeah, like, whether it be like Fat Ash is a really big one, right? Like they just had a big herf in Pennsylvania, I think, a famous.
Yeah.
And they had like the protocol guys show up. They had Saga show up, and they have their own branding and stickers and all that stuff now. Pretty interesting. That I'm not sure if attendance is dropping at more of the traditional forums, but it sure seems like the social media on Facebook is pretty hopping.
Yeah. All right. Any other trends, or we'll move on to the next topic?
When are we gonna have a commercial break?
Oh, you guys need to take a little.
Yeah, I forgot. I have to let
some
the
potty
dog-
breaks.
I
Yeah, if
need
you
a
guys want to step
bourbon
away for a
break.
second, we could do that. We'll just BS for a couple minutes while you guys.
Yeah. I gotta let the dog out.
All right, no problem. Take your mic
I
off.
had to turn the heat down. Sorry, Charlie. It's like this heat gets in here really hot.
No worries.
I had to do that.
So something from the chat room was asking about Perdomo and why they don't get talked about more than some of the other brands. And one of my topics was that they didn't really have much of anything new this year, and a lot of the social media and the blogs and stuff like that, they're fairly focused on new stuff. So I think that's part of the reason. But any other thoughts? Why you guys think that Perdomo is not kind of more at the forefront?
Well, you got to kind of look at it from if you kind of take the social media trendy hat off, they sell a lot of cigars.
Yeah.
They produce a lot of cigars. They sell a lot of cigars. And there's some markets that are very, very big Perdomo markets. So you go into Florida, and especially South Florida, it's huge down there.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't necessarily, they're kind of, if you look at like Fuente, right? It's kind of a similar thing. Fuente sells a lot of cigars. They don't need to Perdomo sells a lot of cigars. They don't need to come out with new releases.
Right.
I'd put Perdomo in that same category. They don't do a lot. They do enough marketing to get by, but really they have a strong sales force to go out and move the product, and they're still selling a lot of cigars.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like my opinion, not Aaron's, of course, but just my personal opinion. When I go to the trade shows and I have a relationship with somebody, right, it's a lot easier because, I mean, we can't review every cigar that's out there, right? So when I have a better relationship with somebody, it makes me more inclined to get those cigars reviewed and put that on, as a part of my tracker, put on a list. And Perdomo, I mean, they got big boots, but haven't really talked to them that much, or maybe something to work on. And for me, that's just bigger companies in general, right? Like the Rockies, Fuente, and etc. I realize we don't really have much coverage on those, and that should change, because there's sure as heck a lot of people that like to smoke those big brand cigars. So.
So I've gone to Perdomo's booth. He's always been great to me when I've went there. But the problem is when you're trying to cover all the sales of new stuff, and he doesn't have new stuff. It's kind of, you have to weigh that out. How do you go to the booth? How much time do you spend there? That was a big problem I had this year at the trade show. I didn't balance my time out right with that. But unfortunately, yeah, I have found him very accessible at the booth, and his team's very accessible to help you. But that's been kind of the dilemma I have.
Yeah, I think that's worthwhile in noting is that a lot of what's going to drive the traffic to the sites is the new stuff, and if you have to determine if that makes sense for you to.
Yeah, I mean, I would say don't be intimidated to go to the Perdomo booth. There are other booths where I've gotten a lot. I mean, I've been treated well at the Perdomo. The booths I have not been treated well at, that I won't waste time with anymore.
Yeah,
we'll just leave those off the table.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, come on, Coop. Come on.
Because I bet you I want to try to get into those booths. So.
It seems to me there's a huge population of cigar smokers that don't give a rat's ass about social media or blogs or the internet, that buy tons of the Fuentes and the Perdomos and a lot of the traditional stuff that really don't care about the boutiques like we do.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like, yeah, we have a much smaller audience than the full cigar audience. The people that are interested in reading what we write is a subsection of.
But these
Right, but-
companies do sell a lot of cigars. Just keep it in mind.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
they have to put their energies elsewhere instead of maybe the marketing end. Yeah.
Yeah, but you also have to project out 10 years from now. It's easy to say that that's okay, maybe now, but every single year that starts to change a little bit. This world
Sure.
isn't, social media isn't going away. Digital media is just getting stronger. So I think it behooves big companies to, have some of that on their radar. I mean, look at Davidoff. They've made a conscious effort to, embrace social media, and it helps. Camacho is a great example.
And General is another great example too.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you want to know why Perdomo and Ashton aren't on the consensus. It's because, like we have relationships with both companies, but I feel like we probably have above average, if not, well above average relationships. But those are like they're not two-way streets. Like it's us constantly having to email them about new products, like repetitively and on all sorts of things. And then, you combine that with not a lot of new product and not a lot of new shiny things. And that's how it sort of ends up. But in Nick's case, like that's not unique to like online media. I mean, I think Nick's thoughts are pretty clear sort of across the board about media in general. And, I don't think that either Ashton or Perdomo are struggling by any stretch of the imagination.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, so let's talk about FDA as much as we don't want to talk about it. But in 2017, what were your guys' thoughts on kind of how the FDA regulation concerns were going along? It seemed like a bunch of kind of wait and see. There was a couple things that came down, user fees and things like that, lawsuit. But it didn't seem like there was much that kind of from the surface kind of affected how things were moving along. What were your guys' thoughts?
I was surprised how much of a boo-ha was made about the user fees. Everyone knew what they were going to be.
Right.
So that part surprised me how much buzz it got, because I think everyone knew what the user fees were going to be this year. So there was no surprise there. I was still surprised the lawsuit made it there. I know when we had Charlie on the show, Charlie thought the lawsuit was going to happen. He was right. So it is moving forward. I think I think what we saw from Dr. Gottlieb was interesting. It's not a silver bullet by any means. It's kind of going to be wait and see with that, what's going to happen with that. I don't think the regulations are going anywhere though. Mm-hmm. So, and the warning label is going to be the big thing in 2018. That's going to be the big, you saw the announcement out of Texas this week too. So the warning label is going to be the big fight this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the user fees are a moot point. And
right.
I think that, well, they certainly didn't say that in court. I think if you talk to anyone that's involved in the lawsuit, they will tell you that, that was just sort of thrown in there because they could, and, why not? But I think, I mean, when I was on the show, it was just after they had sort of done the delays, if I'm not mistaken. And, I think Will and I were sort of on the same page that the IPSPR, the CRA, the CAA, and their attorneys deserve some credit for the fact that, whether or not how much the lawsuit had to do with the delays, it was remained to be seen. But the fact that they did get some results, they got the largest part of, the regulations delayed substantially. They got the FDA to go on record as saying that they're going to reevaluate some parts of it because they acknowledge there are issues, and even, further hints with Gottlieb's blog post at the end of the year suggesting that they were going to look into issuing some formal statements that would start the process of opening the rule back up for comment on the cigar-related topics. Those are all massive, massive wins. And I think if you look where the cigar industry is versus where the e-cigarette industry is on, these issues, we're in a much better place. We probably were in a better place to begin with, but I'm not sure the e-cigarette people have gotten anything at all other than sort of the just generic delays that have taken place, and they certainly have a lot more to lose than we do.
I agree with that.
Yeah, with the huge strides that the marijuana industry is making, it just seems like it's an odd thing to chase in regards to the tobacco side. It seems like marijuana is going to be the wild, wild west for a little while until they figure out how to handle that.
It's going to come. It will come though.
Yeah, it'll come, obviously, but with
but look, it's the industry. We are a small industry, even
Right.
compared to the quasi illegal marijuana industry. We are, or the federally illegal marijuana industry. We are a massive industry, or we are a minute industry compared to them, even in today's terms. So,
Right.
you know, I made the joke earlier that we, you know, before we started broadcasting, about the idea that we didn't have, you know, the alcohol industry to lobby here in Texas like they do in California, and that's why alcohol prices in California are a lot lower. When you look at the size of some of these industries, there's a reason why alcohol is essentially, you know, unregulated. I mean, there are regulations, but if you look at the history of alcohol regulation, how long alcohol has been around, you know, kind of the statistics regarding the impacts of alcohol on health and society, they've got it pretty good. And the reason why they do is because it's a massive industry, and they've been able to, you know, stop things. It's a very similar strategy to what the NRA does with, you know, gun laws. And we are just a drop in the bucket compared to those two.
Right. All right, let's move on to 2018. Kind of look ahead on a few topics. So IPCPR. So for the trade show and just kind of how the organization is functioning for 2018, what do you guys see with no CEO at the helm at the moment and dropping attendance at the trade show? Any thoughts on what things look like going forward? Don't everybody jump in at once. Will, what do you think?
I got the band off.
You know, I think they got to get a CEO. I don't know how they're making progress with that yet.
They're making progress.
Okay, that's good. I don't think that's
people.
Yeah, it's not
some of them twice.
Okay, so that's good. I don't necessarily think that's going to impact the execution of the trade show, though.
Mm-hmm.
The trade show will go on. The CEO is not going to really make or break that.
Look, the organization functioned without a CEO for whatever it was, over a year.
Right.
I mean, Feeney, who was the head of the board at the time, was essentially the de facto. I mean, it was certainly CEO by commission, but they operated a full trade show cycle without a CEO before Mark came on board.
Yeah, I can tell you Craig Cass is still running behind the scenes, even though he's not technically the president anymore. Yes. Okay.
Will
Yeah,
Cooper with the surprise statement of the day.
Yeah, so let's put it like
Look, I think I have a long article that I never published because it was way too long and it needed to get boiled down. But there are a lot of issues at the trade show. There are some solutions that I think are a lot easier than others. And one of them, and the IPCPR certainly believes this, is the trade show's got a branding problem. It does not help the IPCPR trade show that the sales representatives and other people from the manufacturers go around to shops and tell them how bad the trade show is and how awful and how no one's going to show up this year. And then you get to the trade show and they're surprised that these people didn't show up.
Right.
And so I think that, you know, I'd be curious to know if the organization could get everyone in a room, or mostly everyone, and just say, look, all we're asking is give us one trade show cycle where your reps from January to July aren't going to go into stores and talk about how terrible the trade show is going to be. I bet attendance goes up 10 or 15%, because if you're on the fence about going to the trade show and your rep comes in and says no one's going, and then the next rep comes in and says it's going to be the worst one ever, I mean, that's not going to make you go and decide. Like, unless you're the masochist that looks at Yelp reviews, you know, from lowest to highest, like, what do you think is going to happen? And you know, I've often said that we have to sort of recalibrate ourselves. I was not around. Perhaps Craig was there when Leonard Skinner was performing at, you know, CAO parties.
Actually, I was.
That's scary.
Those days have come and gone. They're not coming back, at least not to my knowledge. And so I think that a lot of it, I think the biggest issue, which would be like the trade show, you know, how people feel about the trade show, would just be solved by people keeping their mouth shut. Now, I certainly think that if you have valid points about things to improve the trade show or areas where they need to work on, do it. But just these broad statements that I hear, you know, May, June, July about the trade show, it's terrible, no one's going to show up, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not constructive, and it's certainly not helpful.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, and I think in general, you know, IPCPR, they're this whipping post. I mean, they get blamed if it rains. You know, it's their fault. So, you know, I think, you know, it's unfortunate. Like I said, what Charlie said, if it's egged on and your members in good standing, you know, or associate members, in this case, the brand owners aren't aren't making this a positive thing. You know, I look at what Skip Martin does, right? So Skip Martin, he promotes the trade show. He looks at it as this is a big time for Romacraft to show up and meet our customers, and he does a really, really good job at that. And that's why he can come out with no new product and his booth is slammed. I mean, because he creates that interest with at least his customer base, you know. And I think more customers, you know, the people who are sitting there at the trade show wondering why they had no customers, I think need to look in the mirror for a second.
Yeah.
I think the trade show, I think the IPSPR is going to have a moment of reckoning at some point in the next 3 to 5 years. And it's not necessarily going to be about the trade show. The organization gets the vast majority of its money directly and indirectly from manufacturers, and yet the manufacturers have one board seat. And at some point, despite whatever Craig Cass might say, that's going to come to blows. And there are certainly manufacturers that have voiced their issues, but they're going to gang up at some point and say, look, there's no reason why Craig Cass and, you know, these other 7 or 8 retailers should have this inflated power and the ability to control this much money in the industry simply because they were the ones that showed up at a breakfast and, you know, got on some committee and then got to the exec board. And so I think that moment's probably not coming in 2018, but it's going to happen. It's going to be necessary because the IPSPR is no longer, you know, just like the CRA is not the consumer organization. The CRA is a manufacturer's organization. That's where the money comes from. Yep. That's who's on the board. That's who makes the decision. The IPSPR is not there yet, but the money component, which is the biggest one, is there. It's a manufacturer's organization when it comes to who pays the bills. And the idea that a whole bunch of, you know, they're not small retailers, but it'd be one thing if it was CI and JR and Thompson making decisions, you know, retailers that really had, you know, gigantic buying power, but it's not. It's, you know, Craig's got a very successful business, but he's, you know, a very small percentage point, if that, in the grand scheme of the cigar industry.
Yep.
Right.
Let me ask a question to Charlie. Charlie, I heard from several manufacturers this year that they were upset about the TAA because they felt a lot of their customers were spending money at the TAA, which a lot of these same people are, you know, part of the TAA. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that had any impact?
When you say manufacturers, do you mean like the brand owners or the
brand owners? Yeah. So the people who they're selling cigars at TAA, they're you know, the Dream Machine's up there, and all these purchases are happening in March, and it's killing retail budgets going into the trade show.
Well, I mean, look, if you're a smart retailer and you're a member of the TA and the IPSPR, you're going to spend your money twice a year. You're going to spend your money at TA and you're going to spend your money at IPSPR, and then you're going to place orders throughout the year to fill in the gaps. And if you want to know why people spend money at the TAA, it's because if you're a smart and successful retailer, you have the cash flow to lay out the money in March and have that product there for the summer season, as opposed to laying it out. You know, I mean, Drew Estate's gotten better at this, but like you go to the Drew Estate booth 3 years ago, you place an order and maybe it shows up in November. Like, yeah, you got it for the holiday season, but that's not great. And so the trade show can't move. It's going to have to always be in the summer. There's a lot of various reasons behind it, largely the economics of, you know, if you tried to have a large trade show like us in January or February in Vegas, it would cost multiples more than what it costs in July. And also, a lot of those retailers, not the TA guys, you know, when you take retailer 100 to 300, you know, those guys don't necessarily have the same sort of cash flow in March like the TA guys do, because they've set their year up around that. But no, I mean, the deals are better, the timing's better. Yeah. And there's a lot more alcohol going around TAA per person than there is at the trade show.
All right. Any other thoughts on IPCR? All right. Mergers and acquisitions. I know, Charlie, you guys had this as one of your, I think, your 2017 10 questions. And I think you did pretty good on this one. Yeah. So what do you guys see for 2018? Do you see a pickup in any of that, or do you think it's going to be kind of status quo for the moment until kind of the FDA regulations kind of settle down a little bit?
I'll start, then I'll shut up for 5 minutes. I don't think so. Like I mentioned earlier, when you look at the big companies, you can sort of run down the list. So, you know, General is, you know, they have issues with what took place with CI. They're a publicly traded company. I'm not sure it fits in their strategy, you know, barring obviously like some fire sale of some company. I don't foresee that being a strategy for them in 2018. And you look at what's happened with some of the acquisitions that have taken place. I mean, you know, they've got the Tarano brand that I don't think they paid very much money for, but I mean, they've discontinued most of the new Tarano product, and the rest of it's selling for $4 a stick. So I'm not sure they have much appetite for it. Altatus, which is owned by Imperial Brands, which is a British multinational company, they're doing cost-cutting measures across the board in Imperial, so I don't foresee them, you know, getting an acquisition. They've obviously done a lot of retail acquisitions, but from what I understand, that's probably going to slow down, if not come to a halt. They've sort of, everyone that they wanted to acquire, they've sort of had conversations with, and barring some changes on that front, it sounds like they're sort of out of that business. You know, Davidoff has a new CEO, new chairman of the board. The last CEO, Hans Christian, was clearly brought in to give some life to the brand, to spend money. He spent a lot of money, some of it very well, some of it not so well. And I don't think that they've got, you know, they also experienced Camacho, where they bought the brand, they got, you know, they bought a brand, they got a factory, they didn't get tobacco, they got rights to tobacco. They tore down, well, they haven't torn down the factory. They built a brand new factory. They revamped the entire brand. You know, I'm not sure that that purchase has paid for itself yet. You know, Drew Estate, who knows what, you know, Swisher's a private company. They could surprise us, but I haven't heard the same rumors that Craig did about them going to retail. So that'll be interesting to see if they go down that road. The one sort of wild card is Fuente. If Fuente ever decides to expand, they certainly have the resources to do it. They have the production capabilities to do it. And I haven't had that conversation with Carlito, but if they were to go after acquiring brands, I mean, they could acquire a few brands of note. And, but that would be a gigantic left turn for them as far as what we've seen so far.
Right. I think there might be the possibility of, you know, some companies just resurrecting old defunct brands that maybe, you know, predicate blends and things like that. You know, like Dion did the one-off and things like that. So there might be some of that pops up where it's just, it's not, you know, you're not buying a company, but you're buying this, you know, trademark or this branding that you want to be able to put out as a new cigar for yourself. But it's something that's been out there for a while, or was out there for a while and then went away. So that might be something to look forward to. Any other thoughts on any mergers, acquisitions?
You know, I heard Dave Garofalo show he was doing, I guess, this chess game of it, and he talked about Altria. I don't see that happening. Just again, I don't see Altria looking at acquiring cigar companies. You know, Nat Sherman, we said I think it was a special case with that. So I don't see them getting into that type of market right now. I just don't think it's in the cards right now. But I kind of agree with you. If it's going to be anything, it's going to be kind of like what Dion did with one-off. You'll see some things happen around that. No, I don't think there's going to be anything earth-shattering. But Aaron, I go back to what Charlie Tarano told us in the interview we did 2 weeks ago. You know, it's business, and anytime if there's a good business deal that's put in front of you, they're going to consider it.
Right.
You know? Now he did say, yeah, FDA played into it a bit, but there was a good business deal put in front of him. It was something he couldn't pass up on. So, you know, I wouldn't rule it out entirely. I don't think AJ Fernandez is getting sold this year. That's just my opinion. I think Charlie articulated it really well in his article, but I think there's some questions as well. You know, I think obviously there's some questions on that still. So
sure,
you know, we'll see with that.
All right. Anything else that you guys want to talk about in regards to kind of 2018 going forward? We'll move on to our final couple topics.
I think that my prediction is that Cigar Federation will get sold back to Logan in March, and then Ezra Zion will buy them back in August. I'm just throwing that out there.
The question I have though is, will any money exchange hands?
I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay.
Oh,
you're on record. We will revisit this in January of 2019.
Mark my words.
We're visiting April.
Yeah.
At least we'll get half of it right in April, right? All right. So I have a question from the chat room. Brian asked us, since Eric, you mentioned about social media growing, he wanted to know how each of our sites did in regards to growth in 2017, and do we think that means anything kind of moving forward for the industry? I'm going to assume that we all had growth in 2017. You guys don't have to mention any specifics, but did you experience growth? Do you think that means anything more for the cigar industry, and you know where people are kind of looking for their information and things like that?
Yeah, I think that all digital media continues to grow, and it will continue to grow because more and more people use their phone. You know, every day more and more people, even older people, believe it or not, use their phone, and it'll continue to grow. As far as the dojo is concerned, we've been really growing in other directions, like Cigar Wars, and we're continuing to expand that platform because it was real successful. So, that kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like there'll be any kind of real plateau just because you have the fact that it just is, it's more convenient for people to get information on their phone. So digital media will just continue that upward incline. Now that doesn't say that there's not challenges, because we do have challenges from Apple and stuff like that, but we've been able to overcome those hurdles, and in a way it's helped us. But we're also prepared for the morning I wake up and they tell me that I'm not there anymore. So we have backup plans.
Right. And Charlie, I thought you made a good comment in the consensus when you were kind of trying to track down all these YouTube channels and to try to get lists from them, that the medium just seems to be not taking advantage of what's available to it.
Yeah, it's not large. I was surprised. Look, we struggle with video. It's a pain for us to do it. We obviously have like another full-time, Half Wheel's a full-time entity that has to happen on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And so doing video, particularly the right way, is tough. But yeah, I was surprised. I was expecting a lot more YouTube channels. Certainly, I knew of Brian Glenn. I knew of TNT Cigar Review. I knew of Cigar Vixen and a couple of the lesser known ones, but I was expecting there to be more in sort of that, like, people that had 10 to 20,000 subscribers, and that apparently just doesn't exist. Nope. Which is bizarre to me, considering all the statistics regarding video. Perhaps that means that the 5 of us have an opportunity, but
this is we're gonna start a show called the Cigar Roundtable with these guys right here, just as a teaser. But
I think the one issue with video, and it's something that we've struggled with internally, is that I don't think there's a large audience for. Certainly, Brian Glenn's got it, but I don't think there's a large audience for people sitting around watching someone smoke a cigar.
Right.
And Brian's done extremely well, but the idea that he's going to get to 500,000 subscribers seems pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think that people really can deal with that. Maybe in 100 years, if YouTube hasn't banned it by then, but it's smoking cigars. It's not cars. It's not, it's not even bourbon or, some of these other things where you can do a lot of work with camera angles and things like that. It's sort of boring, but we had moderate growth for whatever that's worth. We had certainly a big year in 2016 where it was double-digit growth every single month, but we did not live up to that standard. But it was still net positive at the end of the year. I think the one question for us on a business side is what happens when warning label plans go into effect,
right?
Because that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. Yep. So, Craig, your site's been around for quite a while. How has kind of the traffic been for you?
It's been going up. It's since I haven't been giving as much stuff away as I had in years past. It kind of flattened it out a little bit, but still, monthly it goes up. And this year's been is off to a good start.
Nice. And Will, you launched a show this year. How did you see that kind of take off? Yeah.
So it was interesting because I agree with Charlie. I had moderate growth. I didn't have the growth that I did in 2016. I had, as folks know, we were operating under one.
Not to cut you off, Will, but I'm curious. We had certainly big growth every month, but we also had monumental FDA growth. Did you experience that in 16, where there was certain days where it was crazy?
FDA was always, when FDA stuff hit, that was always the biggest days.
Yeah.
They would definitely, the biggest days were FDA, IPCPR, and end of year. Those are the big things where I saw the growth there. but you know, we were operating under Stogie Geeks, which was and you talk about video, it's very expensive. There were a lot of reasons why I split the partnership with Stogie Geeks, but there were some costs that I just couldn't. I had all this growth in 16, but I wasn't profitability wise. It wasn't matching up, and so I made that decision to kind of streamline it. Right. I took the production down a bit. It's going to grow more next year. But it's an expensive video is an expensive proposition. I find, and I with the numbers with our podcasts, and Craig will probably tell you this. People listen to it in the car. I mean, that's what people we see these things. They're listening to it in the car. They're listening to someone. If they're not like watching a YouTube video at night, or we put the video up on Podbean as well. But the audio consistently is what gets the downloads there. There's been incredible. The podcast really grew. I'd say in November is when we started, Aaron, when the numbers really started to click. It takes a while to launch a podcast. There's some expenses as well. But if you're going to get into the video piece, it's not cheap, is what I'm just going to tell folks. There's a lot of video, just costs a lot of money to store. It costs money to do post-production on it. I'm looking at some Facebook Live solutions right now, and they're not cheap. There's hardware you need. Oh yeah. But we were operating under Stogie Geeks, which was we had a video studio that we used for things that weren't cigars, where you can get large amounts of. There was just bigger money where that studio could be funded, and ultimately it wasn't cost effective to run a cigar show out of there. Right. So the good news is, from a profitability standpoint, it was starting to see some growth right now. I still think the cigar industry is very banner ad focused. It's harder to sell podcast. I can tell you from working on a radio show, while I don't sell the advertising there, banner ads is still the easiest sell to do. And, the cigar industry is still behind. I don't think they've embraced video or audio yet. I just don't think they've done it.
Right. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about some top 25 lists. I'm not going to actually talk about specific lists, but how it goes in regards to our sites and things like that. So I think most everybody here made some changes to their lists for this year from previous year. I don't think, Craig, you didn't make any changes from your typical list, right?
No, I did the same thing I did last year.
So Eric, you made a bit of a modification to your criteria, right?
Yeah, we had to go up in price. We started out our list having a $10 cap. And the idea, back in 2012 was, creating a list to try to differentiate ourselves, creating a list that was more like a Joe 6-pack kind of a list, that any guy could go buy those cigars relatively easily. But, prices have gone up with user fees and
it's
plus
not user fees.
Well, plus we just
4.5 cents.
Yeah. Plus, hey, the price of cigars has gone up. And so we just felt like last year we upped it to what, Jordan, $12.50, and then this year we upped it to $15. Maybe just to give some of these other cigars a chance. But that was really the only change. Everything else stayed the same.
How do you think that worked out for you? Do you think it was a positive in regards to kind of the product of the list?
This was a strange year, I thought, just because like last year, don't get me wrong, our list this year, the quality from top to bottom, I thought was great. But it wasn't as sexy as last year, There wasn't that one cigar that from a small company like Warped that just blew us away. There was 4 cigars that really blew us away, but other than the Southern Draw cigar, they were all relatively larger companies. And so, Drew Estate, as soon as we smoked the Sun Grown, we thought, oh, this is definitely going to be a candidate. And, we have like 6 guys that sort of like fight over where these cigars should be. And, but so it might not have been as sexy as a list or as maybe intriguing as last year, but from top to bottom, they were, really good cigars.
Yeah. And do you anticipate any changes for the criteria for 2018?
Yeah, we're going all flavored.
I already know it's going to be number 1. Al Capone menthol.
Al Capone menthol, baby. No, I don't know. I know that's a long way off. My brain only works about a week in advance.
Okay, got it. Charlie, you guys made a change the criteria this year, right?
Yeah, slightly. I mean, we allowed cigars that came out in 2016 that we didn't get to be eligible due to the FDA flood. But other than that, it was essentially the same.
You think
Or exactly the same.
any changes that you saw in regards to the product, the final product? You think it was kind of a better
You cut out
showing? Was it a better showing this year with the change that you made for the criteria?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think every year I look at our lists and go, wasn't as strong as last year. But I think that may just be like some recency bias. Yeah, I think that the cigars on top were good. But yeah, every year I go, oh, this, the number 10 cigar or whatever wasn't as good as the number 10 from last year or the top 10. But I think that is just a matter of recency.
And do you anticipate any changes for the 2018 version?
I suppose we'll have one change that we'll announce shortly. But yeah, I mean, in terms of
break any news here.
No, in terms of the process, it's the same process we've been using now for the last couple of years. I think it's for us, we have the data to do it, so it works out well. And, yeah, I mean, I would say one difference that we had this year is that I blacked out the spreadsheet so that I couldn't see where things were throughout the year.
Okay.
So I didn't know our top 25 cigar until like 2 days before we actually published that article, which was not fun, but it meant that no one could hack our website and figure out what it was going to be.
There you go.
Yeah.
Will, you made a change this year as well.
Yeah, I went to a 2-year, kind of similar to what Charlie did. It was a 2-year window where, again, stuff I didn't get to in 2016. I've been one with these ones that come in at the end of the year too, which I just think don't have enough time to really permeate the market, really determine what the cigar is going to be. Ultimately, Aaron, I'd like to get to, and people are going to hate it, but I'd like to get something more like an aficionado model where it's the best performing cigars of the year as opposed to the best cigars released in a window. Logistically, it's very hard to pull that off, and ultimately the set, the data I'm going to use or the set of cigars I'm going to review, that's where the subjectivity comes into play a lot. So, but ultimately that's what I'd like to get to, as opposed to this best, because like I said, there are cigars that have come out the end of last year that I just didn't think were performing well, and then they perform much better during the year, or vice versa. So I kind of like to get to more of a performance model. It's not going to be in 2018, possibly 2019. I can get there. It'll be another 2-year window this year. I don't see many changes. I did eliminate things a few years ago, like shop exclusives and stuff, just to kind of, again, focus it on more accessible cigars more than anything. But I don't, like I said, I don't see big changes this year, but I am looking ahead for 2019 to possibly get to that performance model that I want to get to.
Yeah, I think the timing of cigar releases is where June and I struggle the most in regards to, putting out the list in, beginning of January. I mean, there's just you still have so much time to smoke 2017 releases for, 4 or 5 months before the flood of cigars start coming out the next year. So it's just a kind of a timing issue that you come out of the trade show. You got like a 4 or 5 month window to cram them all in, and then a 4 or 5 month window to there's very few releases in that window for the next year.
I've kind of been under the model to slow down, not necessarily try to get the first review out, but get it to a timely fashion. But I find, and give every cigar a chance to kind of be in that same humidor under the same conditions. So there's like a review humidor I have, and I kind of like to give it the same amount of time. And that's what I struggled with a lot of the November and December. Sereno Wayfarer was something that was out late last year. Very good cigar, but it wasn't. I felt it wouldn't be a fair way to rate it and then put it into the pool, so to speak. So the 2-year window, it has some drawbacks because it's a little confusing to people. But that's kind of where I'm heading with that right now.
Right. Okay. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Top 25 lists?
They weren't good this year, in my opinion.
I guess Charlie could talk about that a lot with the.
I just was very disappointed with. I'm not calling anyone, but most of them were very disappointing this year.
Yeah,
I'll just say that.
A lot of attention to certain brands and things like that.
It just seemed like people were not smoking out of their comfort zone a lot of times. Yeah. They were either smoking, like Charlie, I think, articulates it well in the consensus. there is some relationships of that's just, and I get it. Everyone's gonna have the relationships, and that's the stuff you're gonna review and smoke. But it seemed like there was a very narrow set this year, as opposed to previous years where I've seen a much wider set of cigars reviewed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the data is sort of. I have to look at it from a more historical perspective, but I think it was pretty wide. Certainly the Excel spreadsheet was larger than it was last year. We had a few more lists, but I don't know. I take a lot of issue with this. I sort of refer to it as the sanitization of the list. Like, I don't understand why, CA, at least from what people tell me, I haven't seen any sort of explanation about this, limits it down to one cigar per brand with, I guess, the exception of Habanos. Like, that doesn't really make any sense to me. I mean, if we want to have, like, the top 25 cigars of the year, you should put the top 25 cigars of the year, to whatever qualifications, whether it's new cigars, whether no limited editions or whatever it might be. But you should tell us, like, what you thought your top cigars were. Because I don't think it does any, like, I mean, imagine if CA took their list, published the top 25, and then did, like, the extended full-on top 25, and you found out the number 14 cigar was really the 42nd cigar on the list.
Yeah.
Because there was 26 Padrones ahead of it or whatever it might be. Like, that's not helpful.
If the whole list was Fuente, Oliva, and Padron.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, sure, but you should reward, I can understand it. Certainly with advertisers, fortunately, we don't have that conversation anymore because we've been doing it long enough like this. But, like, I understand your frustration if it's like, all right, Pete got 5 cigars on half of those top 25. How many other brands could have been featured? But, like, our goal is not to feature, like, if we were going to do the top 25 cigars from 25 brands, we'd call it that. Our goal is to feature the top 25 cigars that we reviewed over the course of a year plus or minus a month, not here's the best Illusione we smoked, and here's the best Oliva we smoked, and here's the best Habanos we smoked, and here's where they fall in order compared to one another. Because it does a disservice to somebody like Dion or Pete, who have, at least in our list, or Davidoff, who have had multiple cigars, in a list, because they had a good year, as opposed to somebody like Quesada, who only had, I mean, they were the top cigar on our list, but that was the only Quesada that was eligible to make the list, and none of them were remotely close otherwise.
Yeah. And do you ever evaluate the list in regards to comparison from your top 25 to the consensus, just to find out if there's certain years where what you actually put out for you guys kind of matched up with the rest of the community?
I know the first year I paid attention to it a lot, and I actually identified the 2 lists. I think one of them was Brian Hewitt's, and I forget who the other one. I think it may have been Barry when he was still with A Cigar Smoker, who had the most similarities to the consensus. But no, I mean, the consensus is just take Coop as an example. He acknowledged that he doesn't do limited, store exclusive cigars. Our number 1 cigar was a store exclusive cigar.
Right,
so
right.
It's, trying to compare an apple and a potato at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. Charlie, did you ever consider possibly looking at the data and pulling out the print media?
Not pulling it out, but maybe, like comparing it. Because
because when I looked at the consensus, some of the cigars I think got on that because of high print ratings, not high online ratings.
Yeah, but by vice versa, some of this, I mean, Steve Saka made the list because of high online ratings, not because of what he did in CA.
Yep.
No, I'm not saying to change it. I'm just kind of curious. Have you looked at the data ever, and have you seen some trends with that, where cigars they probably wouldn't have gotten on there if it wasn't?
Not in terms of getting onto the list. Last year, I think, was the most poignant example where Villiger had, I want to say it was 5 different nominations. All 5 of them were from print media. The year before, Villiger had 0 nominations. What changed, in the course of 12 months? Well, Villiger, resurrected itself from a non-existent U.S. business, and they started spending money with advertising. I think most of it was with print, if not all of it. So, I'm not going to sit here and say this is, this ad was the reason why Villiger made this top 25 list, because I don't know that. But as I've said numerous times, it's impossible to make someone's list if you're not, in some regards, in front of that media outlet.
Right. Yep. Good point. All right. Any other top 25 stuff? We'll move on to our final topic. All right. So hope nobody's feelings get hurt in this topic, but we're going to talk about the 100-point scoring system. So I wrote an article, articles in November about the 100-point system and my disappointment in the use of it and things like that. And I think we've all had some kind of discussions and things like that and around that. So I kind of wanted to get different people's thoughts because Will, Eric, Charlie, you guys all use the 100-point system. You guys use it differently, whatever it is. So I want to get kind of your thoughts. Craig, you don't score cigars at all.
Nope.
And we score them.
If I did, I have a plan. But.
Yeah, we do use a completely different scoring system, so it's off the thing. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Eric, I think you and I have the biggest disagreement in regards to the 100-point system. Is that correct?
I don't know. Maybe, yeah, it's possible.
So just to be clear, I do not hate the 100-point system. I just don't like the way it is used for the majority of cigar review sites. And I think it's been, I mean, it kind of came from the wine side, and the wine writers have bastardized it enough as well. But and I think that kind of bled over into the cigar side. So I think it's just too inflated now. It's more of it's used for promotion and marketing and things like that, rather than for legitimately rating the cigars and being able to give a range of scores to be able to really tell where different cigars kind of lie, I guess, in how well somebody enjoyed them and things like that. But
well, you'd say that it was inflated because
the average scores that are given out, and
right.
There's lots of different criteria people use for what they publish on the sites. Some sites may only publish cigars that score over a certain number, or they may only review cigars.
Who actually does that?
Well, I mean, that's the only question I can ask is why is certain sites have almost no cigars below a certain.
Okay,
Barry's trying to sell cigars.
Do you want me to?
No. He works for a retail shop.
Why was he? Yeah, why was he included in that list?
I can answer that.
I wanted to show the silliness of it.
I want to answer that.
Go ahead.
Because we review premium hand-rolled cigars.
Yes, I understand that.
So imagine a class, right? You have a classroom, and you have all kinds of students in your class. You have kindergarten kids, you have third graders, you have sixth graders, you have seniors, you have smart seniors, you have stupid seniors, right? And you give them a test, right? You give them a test.
Right.
Now, what do you think the scores from 1 to 100 are going to be on that test?
It's going to be nuts. But the problem is that's not how real school works.
No, right. It's going to be nuts, right? It doesn't matter how real school works. That's irrelevant. Now imagine that you have a class that are all valedictorians in the 12th grade. What sort of range of scores on their test do you think you'll have?
It'd probably be pretty good if it's all valedictorians, but I'm not sure.
Exactly.
Does that class exist?
It doesn't matter. In cigars, it does, and that's premium cigars. If we were reviewing premium cigars and we were reviewing also seconds and ones that were made for stores, like, the catalog CI brand cigars, and then we were also reviewing machine maids, and we were reviewing grocery store cigars, and we were reviewing
would draw better.
And we were reviewing cigarettes, then you'd have scores from 20 to 100. But we're only reviewing premium hand-rolled cigars. We're only reviewing the valedictorians of their class. And that's why you have that short range. What I remember when I got into the whole blogging world, I said to myself, this is dumb. I'm going to rate cigars a 20 to 100. I don't get this small little sliver of reviews. Right. But then as I got into blogging, I realized, hey, there's this larger range of tobacco product. Right. And so when you say this is a 90, you're saying it's 90% perfect. And most premium hand-rolled cigars are going to come in between 80 and 100. That's just their range. And then seconds might be, 70 to 80. And then machine maids might be 60 to 70. And then cigarettes are going to be below that. And so that's why it is that way, and that's why it makes sense. And that's why when you see a 90, yeah, Charlie might rank a 90 differently than I do.
Yeah.
And Coop might rank a 90 differently than I do, but that's the subjective nature. Just like if there was, 10 sites that had the developing palates scale,
Right.
those guys would review those in the subjective. And you mentioned that in your article. It was a great article.
Thanks.
It was a great article. I'm not taking that away from you, but I'm just saying that people understand the 100 points because it's 100% of perfect down to lesser. That's why you walk into a liquor store, you see a wine that's a 95, you instantly can understand that.
Yep.
95% of perfect.
Right. No, like I said, I get the 100-point system. It's just the range is off. I mean, using your analogy about kind of, the valedictorian and stuff like that. I mean, are you saying it's impossible to flunk out of an Ivy League college? I mean, it's obviously people have done it, and you can do that. And
right, and some cigars do flunk out. There are low rated cigars,
but there's that they're not represented.
What sites?
Some of these sites. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're not represented anywhere. I mean,
I
understand that you're saying
3 is a flunk, for premium cigars. Because a premium cigar is that smaller range. So if you get a low 80, or on half wheel, if you get a 78,
right,
that's flunking out.
But my question is since you don't review any of those products that you're reserving that range for, why have that window for them if that's not something that you're even gonna?
Because you have to give room for that. Like, what if somebody said, "Hey, Eric, try this cigar. I got a King Supers. It's called a, I don't know. I'm not going to say any brands, but
Dojo.
You can make one up.
Dojo Supreme.
It's some sort of King Super. You get it at King Supers, and I smoke that. That's probably going to be a 65 or whatever, right?
Right.
So I have to give room for it on the off chance that someday
you're not reviewing that
forced it in my face, right?
Okay.
It's
we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this.
It's the only way that makes sense, Aaron. Like, Aaron,
I don't think so. I think if you're reviewing premium cigars and you're going to use the scoring system that has that range, and you have to determine what your range is. Are you using the system where it goes 50 to 100, or using a full 100-point system? However you want to use it. But if you're reviewing a set,
50 to 100's like that doesn't make any sense either.
I agree with you. I'm not saying it's a good one. I'm saying that's
what
just
gets a 40. The cigar that you purchased that never showed up, like
right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just talking about the Robert Parker system where he went 50 to 100. But if you're just reviewing premium cigars, use the scale for the premiums for the product that you're gonna review. If I don't see the reason to leave a window for stuff that you're not even gonna ever visit.
Well, that's
like you said, because people are familiar with the system. So if you're only saying, all right, there's probably not gonna be any cigars that get below an 85 on my site,
right?
You're saying, hey, everybody, you're gonna get a pretty good score based on what everybody expects the scores to be. So,
well, a premium cigar, a premium hand-rolled cigar. How different are premium hand-rolled cigars, right?
So you want a Cohiba Blue,
or
you want a Dojo Deluxe?
Essentially the same tobacco. They're made of essentially the same ways. So it's only obvious. It's only reasonable that those are going to be in a parenthesis of scores.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes sense.
Like, as someone who's I think got the widest scoring range here, at least on the 100-point system, like it doesn't make any sense because like when we review cigars, it's very rare that all 3 of them smoke the same. And it's pretty rare that over the course of a month, so let's say that's 8 to 10 reviews from me, that out of the 30 cigars or 25 cigars that I smoke for the reviews, that one of them doesn't have massive construction issues. And yet, at least from what we can tell, and I don't pay that much attention to other people's ratings, but I don't know of another cigar blog or cigar review site that's giving out 70s once a month.
Right.
Except Leaf Enthusiast, who uses a 10-point system with a decimal point, which I think is essentially a 100-point system.
Right.
7.4.
And it should be only between 7 and 10 anyway.
Yeah, but at least they're still using the 7. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's a hard enough phobia apparently for most cigar bloggers to get over. Look, I think that like I can understand if you're, old school Seth's Humidor where it was like I only, publish 90-point reviews. The problem I would have from a consumer perspective is if I go out to buy a refrigerator and I go to a website that's doing refrigerator reviews and it's only positive ratings, I'm going to another refrigerator review website because that there are problems with some of these products. And I understand that there could be problems with an 88-point rating on anyone's site, but it's tough to imagine that if you walked into a humidor and just bought, let's say $12 cigars, that you weren't going to find something that was substantially different than the vast majority of them in a negative way.
Yeah, I would say a 85 is substantially different than a 95 when it comes to a premium cigar.
Yeah, but then again, most people don't give 95s either.
Yeah.
Like, if I saw a wine that was 85, I would never buy it.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think there's two sides to the range problem. One of them is that anything below 80 is rarely used, or 85 for that matter is rarely used on any of these publications, and this certainly exists at Half Wheel. The other problem is that anything above 94 is rarely used on any of these publications, if ever, except at the Cigar Authority.
Well, he's implementing the 100-point system. I heard. Is that true?
It's 100. It's out of 120.
Yeah.
We've had 90. We've had 96s, 95s.
It's like the North Carolina health score for restaurants.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the other things in regards to the
That's
system.
a good analogy. That's a very good analogy. It's very true. You get a 90.
I was so confused. I went into this dumpy Chinese restaurant that had very good food, as a lot of dumpy Chinese restaurants do, but it had like a 91, and I was like, there is no way that they only lost 9 points. And then come to find out like a year later, no, North Carolina does not use a 100-point scale for their restaurant evaluations. It's in fact like a 112-point scale or something bizarre.
Yeah, I can tell you, my son got a fire drill. He works in a restaurant, and they got a 90, and it was all hands on deck when it happened. Very bad. Yep.
Yeah. So one of my other complaints about the 100-point system and with using such a narrow range is that you get so many cigars that get the same score. So it's hard for people to determine what the difference is between those cigars. I mean, they can't all be equal. I mean, if you had 20 cigars that all had a 90, one of them's going to be probably a little bit, maybe significantly better than another one that's a 90. So it's hard for people to understand what the difference is between some of those without reading the notes. And we all know that people don't necessarily read the reviews themselves; they just look at the scores. But
sure, it's the same way if you find a website that a lot of the cigars are a 6-point something.
Yeah, that's why we don't have too many of them that are the same.
Yeah.
Luckily.
So, but still, it's a 6-point something, and so there's got to be there's some sort of range for your website,
right?
And whatever that range may be, that's sort of your range that you do it. We have a range.
Yeah.
Coop has a range. Half Wheel has a range, and
I think Aaron's point is that, why have a scale if there are certain scores in particular? The vast majority of the possible scores are impossible to actually obtain.
Yeah.
Well, why have Half Wheel? You have a range. I've never seen anything under 75 or something. Maybe
you should go on the review list. We've given it 25.
Okay. Well, I mean, not very often. Right?
No, I mean, but by the same token, we also have, there's no questioning where the grouping is at Half Wheel. It's wider than most sites, but that came from the ability that Brooks and I had of when we did Half Wheel of being able to go back and reevaluate a few years of scoring cigars and figuring out what problems we had with how we were doing it beforehand and getting to hit the reset button. But it is mathematically possible for a cigar to score 100 on Half Wheel, and it is mathematically possible for a cigar to score 0 on Half Wheel. It might be challenging, but I think there are a lot of sites that would refuse to publish scores, at 0 or 100 or below 60 or, above 96 or whatever it might be. And that's a legitimate problem. Because if that's the case, where it is impossible for a cigar to score this, you should be upfront about the idea that we don't believe in a 50-point cigar.
Right.
Much like Robert Parker apparently with wine. I'm unaware of this, but
yeah.
That at least is understandable.
So Craig, what are your thoughts since you don't score?
I don't know. It's
You're not gonna hurt anybody's feelings. Don't worry about it.
everybody. It's like everything else. Everybody's tastes are different. Every 195 cigar versus a Maduro 95 cigar is different than a Connecticut 95 cigar. I don't do it because one, I enjoy smoking cigars, and I write shit about them, and that it would take the fun out of it for me. But it's open to interpretation. You take away from it what you want to take away from it. Everybody does their thing. I think when you talk about cigar aficionado, that addresses a whole different audience than what this panel addresses. I always joked that if I had did a rating system, it would be a 10-point scale, with a 91 being absolutely unsmokable and 100 being the best there ever is.
Right.
So there'd be a whole, 95 would be a kind of a mediocre cigar, and you could give a 95 a cigar, and the brand owners would go nuts and spread it all around, and so the point, I guess, is that for me, it's irrelevant.
Right.
I certainly get I get what Eric says about it. The fact that if it's 100 points that covers all tobacco products, that we're dealing with the top 10%, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
But that has to be you have to know that, right?
Right. Agreed. What about you, Will? What are your thoughts on that? You made a change to your scoring system starting this year, and what are your thoughts on the system overall?
Well, I do like the merits of what you and June have done with the developing palette system. Every week I hear, we hear it from every manufacturer on the show about your system, right? Mm-hmm. But what you guys have done, you've done something innovative. The drawback, I think, is it's kind of like publishing something in cuneiform versus English. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock. It's just people can't connect with it, which is why I've kind of favored the 100-point system. There's still some more tweaks I want to make to it right now. I think the problem I've done now is what Charlie said. I've made it very hard to get the higher scores down. Is what I've put in, which has been a little bit, and I think the ranges still need to kind of get wider. So I'm still looking at some. I can't seem to ever get it right. But I do think the way it is right now, I think everyone still looks at the way aficionado does it, and I think that's still kind of the baseline.
Right.
If you're in line with aficionado, if you're pretty close to it, you're not considered totally off the curve. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't, but they carry a lot of weight in this industry right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Right. What I will say is everyone on this telecast tonight is independent media. And I think that's real important to know that there's no, we have sponsors, but there aren't any conflicts of interest in terms of trying to sell cigars or anything like that. So I think that's real important that we maintain that independent media thing. I think that's how we do it. We can debate that, but I think that's the one thing we can honestly say. And if we're consistent, people may know that maybe mine's going to fall more in the 90 to 91 range, and Charlie's may be more in the 80 to 89 range, and it's kind of, if you're familiar with a site, you're going to be familiar with what they do.
Right.
But it's not. But the 100-point system, it's not perfect. I don't like it. I wish there was a better way that somehow I can communicate that. And when I figure that out, I'll let you know. But I do like what you guys have done with it. I got to give you guys. It is something very refreshing what you guys have done, and I think it's, as you guys grow, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how that takes off for you.
Right. June, you had thoughts? Any thoughts on this?
I mean, one of the major offsets of what we do in our system is recognition, right? You and I both knew that when we first started this, that given our 10-point scale, using the entire scale in the entire range, and being very detailed about how we score our range, wasn't going to get a lot of recognition, right? My number one cigar this year hit what I think like 8.3. And if you were to think about it in the conventional, even what people used to 10 points, they're gonna think it's a crappy cigar or barely good cigar. But I mean, we didn't come into this thinking that we were going to be making a lot of money, of course, or getting a lot of recognition. But we want to do it our way, and using a full scale, writing editorials like the one that you did about 100-point system is why we're doing this. And I'm good with it, of course, because we both sign off on it. But recognition is mainly the big thing that I thought will hurt us. And honestly, I thought by now we'd be on a lot of people's shit list and be like blackmailed. But actually, quite the contrary. It created more buzz and more questions, and created more relationships.
Yeah.
Contrary to what I thought.
Look, let me ask you guys a question, Aaron and June. If I looked at a range of 5.5 to 7.2, would you say the majority of your cigars fall into that range?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you still have some range issues, is where I'm kind of getting at with that.
Yeah, I mean, we set it, so that the cigar that was average would be a 5 even, but that was going to be average in every category, so that's construction and everything. So, typically, like kind of to Eric's point, we're smoking premium cigars, so you're going to kind of get a little bit higher in regards to the draw and burn and things like that. So, there's a little bit of inflation in regards to that piece, but we try to keep it as average as possible to make that 5-point range.
Where does that Al Capone menthol come in?
We're gonna review it next week, and I'll let you can read it on the site as soon as I can find them. I haven't been able to track them down. I'm kind of along with that article that I wrote. I was like, what we should try to do is get a couple of sites that will sign on to do this, and we should get a bunch of catalog cigars and review them and see if that spans anybody's range, just to see what happens there, because I'd be curious to know if people decide they like these catalog cigars, people decide they don't like them, and that they're willing to post the reviews for them, and just kind of see what the numbers shake out using their system. I would just be curious to see that, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not. We'll see. You're going to be my first call, Eric.
Okay.
If I decide to do it. So think about if you're on board or not.
I'm on board.
I know Charlie's not worried about giving low scores, so
we already got the emails.
Yeah, exactly.
And the phone calls.
Yep.
You're gonna get them no matter what.
Yep.
Because if
And
you
some
here's what
punches in
happens.
the face.
Yeah, here's what happens. If you give it, believe me, my system was even more inflated in the past. And you gave an 89 out, it was like a death sentence.
Yeah.
So you're gonna get them, is what I'm saying. It's not gonna change that.
Oh yeah.
So it's just a matter of kind of what's making sense and what's realistic.
Right.
You still got to write the review and say what you think of the cigar.
Yeah.
So when we put out an 85, and we answer the question at the end of every review, would I smoke the cigar again? And we say, no, I would not smoke the cigar again. That says a lot more really than the 85 rating.
Right.
That's what's the greatest thing about such a great thing about the top 25 or top list, right? Is you can rate every single one of them 95, but at the end of the year or end of the whatever fiscal period, let's just say, what the blogger truly enjoyed.
Right.
So that's what I mainly find that's really cool about top lists for the most part.
Yep.
That's a
Or
good point.
or you got people that purposely put number 1 through 5 and they want some ad revenue or whatever the hell they want, which, if that's your thing, cool. So.
Any other thoughts around the 100-point system, or I don't want to beat it to death or anything like that? Eric, you and I can call a truce on the 100-point system. I won't bring it up to you again.
Hey, I don't mind. I love
You
talking
guys
about
have a
it, man.
steel cage match.
Let's do a video recap at IPCPR.
There you go.
I look, is any review point system perfect? No, of course not. But you are fighting a little bit of just how people understand it and they're used to it. Is that right? Is that wrong? Maybe not, but that's sort of the way it is. And trying to be that salmon swimming upstream, I don't know. Is it worth it? In my opinion, no.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. Hey, I'm glad that there's something different. I like that there's variety.
Yeah. All right, we good, or anybody else want to talk about it? All right. So June and I want to thank you guys. We really appreciate you taking the time. I know we kept you for like 2.5 hours on this call, so Appreciate all of you for joining us, talking about cigars and stuff that we enjoy. Hopefully we can do this again in the future, maybe do a IPCPR recap show similar to that. So I'll just kind of go through all of your guys' sites real quick. Will, cigar-coop.com, Craig, cigarcraig.com, Eric, cigardojo.com, Charlie, halfwheel.com. Do any of you guys have anything that you have upcoming soon that you want to promote on the show? I know Will's got the #1 cigar of the year coming out April 15th. April 15th?
April 15th.
April 15th.
Okay. Just want to make sure
We pulled it in this year.
Okay.
We thought about 365 list next year.
So Charlie, I want to broker a deal right now with you and Will on the show. If you
The answer is yes. I will do it.
Guys,
okay. It. Yes, the answer is yes.
You've already guys discussed it?
No, but I'm willing to put that out there. If it,
okay.
We don't know when we're going to do it. Yes.
Submit your list, his list to you prior to his #1, so you can include it in the consensus as long as you.
Yeah, if you want it, it's
as long as you are, not going to disclose it to the world. Not cigar
so
aficionado it.
This has been a big internal discussion between Patrick and I. I think Will and I should talk to figure out when Will's list is going to be published.
Yeah.
And we should go from there. Because I have a big issue of putting the consensus out without the data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's a data-driven post.
Yeah.
Got it.
And I think that it would be totally antithetical to be like, here's the consensus. Come back on Friday when
see the data,
there's 26 legislation posts on Half Wheel that have bumped you down.
Right.
And we'll give you the spreadsheet to figure out, why, Nick won. No, I think the better.
By the way, I looked at the data. Nothing changed. I'll just tell you that right now. I actually looked at the data, and nothing changed, even with the five that didn't come out.
Yeah, I think the better.
But that's something definitely we can work that out. Yes, that's not a problem.
All right, we've solved that problem.
That's an easy problem. Yeah, it's solved.
Right. That's what solving problems. That's what we do.
Yeah, unfortunately, Charlie, I'm a one-man show, and taking on more. I realize as I'm getting older and slower, it's tougher to pull it like I used to pull it now, and it's much easier that I'm doing it in January. Even though December was the ideal way to do it, I just can't do it anymore like that. I've taken on too many responsibilities, so that's the issue more or less. So it could be worked out, I'm sure.
Cool.
Coop, you're a machine, man. You can do it, brother.
I can't.
Eric, you have a show on Friday?
Yes.
You guys ready to announce the guest?
We have Claudio Segroy of Mombacho Cigars.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic.
And, so that'll be fun. And then after that, boom, we're heading out to the DR and then Nicaragua for a few weeks. So that I don't know if we'll have shows out there or not. I don't know how much I want to work.
Right. Cool.
Well, Eric, are you going to in DR? Where are you going?
So we're doing the Davidoff thing, and then we're spending some time in Nicaragua, and then we're doing safari with the Dojo group, and then we're gonna do Eric Espinoza. I'm gonna hang around and stay at AJ Fernandez's place for a few days, and it's a really long trip. Sort of too long for me. I get homesick, but it's just the way it worked out this year.
And Brian Burnett wants to know if you're ready to announce the next Dojo cigar.
Well, let's just say it's going to be a big year.
Okay.
It's going to be a big year.
They're all 8x80s.
It might be the biggest year of all time. So just tighten up your seat belts. Get ready.
There you go. Craig, you have anything you want to promote coming up on your site?
Yeah, I'm going to have a post tomorrow night that I'll decide what I'm going to write about tomorrow night.
Awesome. Fantastic. Charlie, can you top that?
No, Patrick and I are in Nicaragua next week covering Puro Sabor. Hopefully that goes well. And then we have TPE coverage from the world's least exciting cigar trade show.
A lot of vape coverage.
Look, TPE to me is fascinating, as is Intertobacco. Anytime we can get away from cigar trade shows, just for me to go stroll down the vape aisle and see what those people are doing is fascinating. Not that it ever ends up on Half Wheel, but
if it did, it might get a 20.
Yes.
I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Thank you again, guys, for joining us, and thank you for everybody that's tuned in and that's going to tune in and catch us after the fact. We really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody again, and we'll catch you guys later.
All right. Thanks, fellas.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, guys.